Let's get at her, pitter patter. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's regular council meeting. As we begin, I wish to acknowledge the Sooke Nation on whose traditional territory we gather tonight. We wish to recognize and respect our First Nations community government, as well as their long historical relationship with the lands and the seas that continue to this day. I also wish to thank our wildfire crew that have been out battling the Tugwell fire, which I understand has been pretty much contained, although they're on site now for a few more weeks just to have it completely extinguished. Just wish to thank all of the crews, including our own volunteers that attended to that. It's greatly appreciated. And Chief, your wildfire training could not have come at a better time to prepare us for the season, literally almost a week ahead of that. So thank you very much to everybody. So as we begin tonight, with approval of the agenda, Council, there's one change that I wish to make, and that is to move Item 8.4, the delegation for the Sooke Lions Club, in front of 8.1. So we'll make that 8.1, and then the rest will just follow in sequence. And then we also, under new business, just wish to discuss a little further the upcoming UBCM and our minister meeting requests. So if I could have approval of the agenda with those two changes. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. And we have minutes tonight from the Committee of the Whole of June the 25th and the regular council also on the 25th, both here for adoption. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Logans. Any questions or corrections on said minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Minutes for information tonight. We will start off with the block of Development and Land Use Committee meeting minutes from April 27th, May 8th, May 30th, and June the 6th. Any questions or corrections? So we'll move acceptance or to receive. Councillor Parkinson.
So on
microphone.
Through your worship, it was page 28, just a change in the date. Under the BC Building Act, it says December 2018.
To our staff.
Sorry, these have already been adopted by the committee. They're just in front of council for information.
Mm-hmm. So okay, but there's just
we'll let the committee know that, but yeah, I don't think that we should be looking
just
for any changes.
Them?
Yes.
Okay, maybe just to advise on the, just so we have that right for the record. Okay. Okay, so who moved those for information? No one yet? Motion, please, to accept for information. Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. And the Sooke Program of the Arts Committee minutes from April 21st, May 23rd, and tour notes from June the 14th for information. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor? Opposed? And that too is carried unanimously. Thank you. So that moves us into our delegation section. So I'd like to invite the Sooke Lions Club forward, please. Lion Steve Wright is here presenting, and there's 5 minutes for you on the timer, and thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having us tonight. 2 reasons for tonight. One is an update on our plans for the musical ride, and secondly, we have some other good news that would lead into the reason why we're making this request tonight. At first, our sales of our tickets are going very well. At first, for the first month, we've just been only selling in Sooke to give the Sooke residents every opportunity to buy tickets for this event, which is going to sell out. As of today, we're now selling tickets at 2 locations of Victoria, so things are proceeding very well. We have secured seating for 2,200 people for each performance, including seating for people with disabilities. There's been a lot of interest through social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For example, there's been 71,000 hits on Facebook already with respect to this event, so Sooke is getting a lot of attention. We've fielded so many inquiries from people about accommodations and hotels and camping here and activities, so it's going to be a very positive event for the district of Sooke. Bell Media is now our media sponsor for this event. That includes CFAX and CTV News, and they are also tweeting and retweeting our advertising as well. Some great news. Two special guests are going to be attending the performance. On the Saturday performance, Her Honour Janet Austin, the Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia, will be attending. And then the Sunday performance, the Premier of BC is planning on attending that performance as well. One of the extra add-ons we've included with this event, we've now arranged for riders and horses to attend Ayr Manor to greet seniors who won't be able to make the ride. This special arrangement has taken a little bit of work, but we're going to make a special event for Ayr Manor on that day. So that'll be on the Sunday morning, approximately 9 a.m. We'll be doing that. Exciting news is that part of the musical ride itself, we'd like to have some pre-show entertainment. We've been able to secure the National Band of the Naval Reserve, who's on tour across Canada, to do 2 performances for us on both days. This is a world-class band that has never performed in Sooke before, so it'll be a record for them. And they've been touring across Canada. I was just talking to the music director yesterday, and they've been doing performances at the Calgary Stampede. They will do 2 45-minute performances for us prior to the musical ride. One of the bonuses of dealing directly with the band, we've been able to secure the band to provide a free performance for the district of Sooke. I'm talking about a 3rd performance now. And the Sooke Lions Club would like to host this band, and we were asking. One nice thing about this event is that it's going to be totally free for anyone who wants to come and enjoy great music. I'm here tonight requesting the district of Sooke to actually partner with the Sooke Lions Club to provide a once-in-a-lifetime performance for the citizens of Sooke and the surrounding areas. This band will entertain and delight people of all ages with a wide variety of popular music. And specifically, I'm requesting the following: that the Sooke Lions Club be allowed to use Ed McGregor Park to host the National Band of the Naval Reserve, the District of Sooke to waive the fees associated with the park use permit, and the District of Sooke to supply 2 additional toilets for this event. Members of the Sooke Lions Club will be on hand to provide assistance to those citizens with mobility issues, as well as providing security for this event. In addition, the Sooke Lions Club are planning on hosting a private reception immediately following the free performance for the members of the National Band and those people accompanying them to help put on this show. Since we felt we needed to do something to show our appreciation for coming to this community and doing 3 performances for us. They are in high demand, but they've agreed to do 3 performances for us. One of my other requests is at the reception is that Mayor and Council also attend, and Madam Mayor, that you personally thank the band for coming to our community and doing this for us. It was an easy sell to get the band to come here because there are strong ties to the Navy here, as well as we have a Navy program here for our youngsters in this community. So they're very keen to do this for us. One last further request. I'm requesting the District of Sooke provide $1,000 towards the reception. The money going towards purchasing food. The Lions Club will be providing refreshments for our special guests as well. Details as to the location of the reception are still being worked out. And should the cost for food be under the $1,000, the Lions Club obviously would be returning any unused monies back to the District of Sooke. But not bad. 10 seconds left. Are there any questions? I've tried to keep it as condensed as possible, but it's been a busy summer for our Lions Club, and we are so excited to do this for our community, to bring something, 2 world-class acts to the community, and we're very excited about doing this. I have with me tonight 3 of the Lions members, President Al Albedos, John Farmer, and Ron White are with me tonight, as well as my private secretary, Elsa. So, are there any questions with respect to what we're doing with the musical ride and the proposed performance?
All right, thank you very much, Lion Wright. Really, I'd like to extend a word of thanks on behalf of Council to the Lions Club for taking this on. It's a big initiative, but just with all the community groups that are involved and with the selling of tickets and just promoting our community. I think it's very well appreciated. So it would be my pleasure to attend and to also support the requests that you've added. So I'll go to Councillor Ray first, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to suggest that we move the motion that's been listed that the Sooke's Lion Club be permitted to use Ed McGregor Park for the National Band of Naval Reserve performance, and that the park use permit fee be waived, and that 2 additional toilets be provided for the event at the expense of the District of Sooke, and that the Sooke Lions Club be provided $1,000 from council contingency for the reception.
Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Ray in its entirety, seconded by Councillor Logans. And speaking to the motion now, anything further as the seconder, Councillor? Okay, Councillor Casper, please.
Yeah, I just got a question through you to staff. Is it possible for us to take the $1,000 from any protocol fund that we have in our budget? Because this sounds like a protocol function.
Through your worship, I will just see how much money we had put in the budget for that. I don't believe it was very much. There's public and government relations, $6,500. Be the closest fit.
Yeah, you know, I might think it would be more appropriate for the money to come from that fund. Yeah, and if, you know, I would make that amendment.
Okay, is the mover and seconder okay with that amendment? Fees? Okay, so we'll just call that, we don't need a resolution on that. It seems to be friendly. Okay, anything further on the motion? Seeing nothing, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And please keep us posted on the event and where we need to be at what time, and be grateful to be there. Thank you very much.
I will, and thank you once again for your support.
All right, thank you very much to you and the Lions. The date is August the 12th, correct?
Sunday, August the 12th, that is
okay.
correct.
Do you have a time confirmed yet?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
And as I say, it's open to everybody. I've just left, I'll just leave a little poster here for you that Ilsa prepared for you.
Sure, if you could pass that actually to Ms. Temple, our corporate officer, or our corporate clerk, and she will ensure that all of council gets it.
I would encourage people to look up the band on YouTube. They're an amazing band, that great performers, so we're very lucky to have them. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, excellent. So that leads us into Delegation 8.2, which is the Sooke School Board, please. And welcome Chair Parmer and our school trustees here as well. We have Trustee Bob Phillips, Margot Swinburneson, and Neil Poirier. Thank you very much for joining us along with your staff tonight. Welcome.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Tate. Good evening, councillors, District of Sooke staff, as well as members of the public. It's quite an honor to be here on behalf of the Board of Education. As Mayor Tate acknowledged, I'm joined by Trustee Seaton, Trustee Swinburne, Trustee Phillips, Trustee Swinburne, and Trustee Poirier. I do also want to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting here on the traditional territories of the Sooke Nation, as the Mayor did at the beginning of the meeting. I'm also joined by our Superintendent, Jim Cambridge, as well as Harold Call, our Secretary-Treasurer. I'm going to be very brief because I believe we've only got 15 minutes for our presentation.
We have 5, actually. Council will need to make a motion. Actually, I should have done that first just to allow you the further time, so maybe I'll do that now so that I don't interrupt you. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Casper to extend the delegation to 15 minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay.
So staff will be making the presentation, but I promised I'll be brief. This is a very exciting time in our district as we head through the last few months as a board through our mandate. This is a very exciting time. We have over 11,000 students. Our budget is over $130 million. We have 1,500 staff. This term, we passed our first ever strategic plan, and student success is our mandate and something we talk about during our meetings, and something that's our focus all the time. But also with the excitement, there are some challenges. We hold the title as the fastest growing school district per capita in the province. I know when I go to other school districts, there's challenges of closing schools, especially in the interior. And I know for those of you who are on council, a couple terms back, there was conversations about closing schools in the Sooke School District. That's not the case anymore. We're talking about opening schools. So certainly our job as a board is to ensure that we open new schools and we ensure that all of our students are learning in safe and accessible and in innovative spaces. So we've just completed our long-range facilities plan that the board has received, and with that we a couple of weeks ago at our last board meeting of the school year, we approved our 5-year capital plan. And so what we're going to do tonight is just take you through our capital plan specific to Sooke. Our staff will share with you the projections that we have for Sooke in conversations with your district staff, as well as share what we're asking the provincial government for. And certainly, so our hope is that over the next few months, if you run into the Premier, who happens to be the MLA of this area, or the Minister of Education, or any other ministry staff, that you have a conversation about our capital plan and the pitch that we're making to government, because we've got that challenge of needing to build more spaces because the kids are coming. So with that, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll throw it over to Harold and Jim.
Is it possible for both of us to sit up here?
Yep, you'll just need to share a microphone.
We can do that.
Excellent, thank you.
So thank you very much for having us. We appreciate your time, and as Ravi just said, we have just completed our long-range facilities plan. This is something that happens probably 5 to 7 years. It is our evidence of what we need in terms of capital, in terms of building, where in our projections for the future. We contract this work out. We have a number of times. I think I was here about 10 years ago actually presenting on a similar topic. Some councillors may remember that, and talked about growth at that time. We contracted to Matrix Planning Associates, and the principal, Bill Woods, I think had a conversation with Director Howitt at some time about what to expect in this municipality. Sooke District has 5 municipalities and the electoral district of Wanda-Fuca. And so we're traveling to our 3 fastest growing municipalities and trying to give a specific flavor of what we learned. This is not our data. This is Bill's data that Harold and I are going to work our way through, hopefully. There we go. Just to remind everyone that we are a very large geographic school district. I think Mike Hicks actually has most of the school district geographically. However, most of the students live either in Sooke or in the West Shore region. But that is our mandate, right to Port Renfrew. I'm going to get this down. Am I pointing it?
You might need to point it at the back, because it's the computer there. There we go.
We have a flow of students which is K to 5 for our elementary, middles are 6 to 8, and high schools are 9 to 12. This configuration was actually started in Sooke, and the West Shore schools adopted it about 2015. So it was a while before they caught up to the rest of the district. Our whole district looks like that now. We're now organized into 3 families of school. So we call it the Milnes Landing family. We have the Royal Bay family and the Belmont family. Each of those families has an associate superintendent who's responsible for all of those schools, and in this case, in Sooke, that is Dave Strange. So many of you probably know Dave. We're not expecting you to be able to read this piece, but we talk a lot about operational capacities, and when we do, we talk about both the nominal and the operating capacity of each of our schools. Each school is given, based on the grade configuration, a certain number of students that typically should be in to make 100%. So when we're looking at an operating capacity, we basically look at groups of 25. Every classroom or every 80 square meters, we're looking at putting 25 students in. And it's a little bit different for kindergarten, which has a smaller class size. Bill, through his work, looks at all of this data, looks at what the schools have, the number of buildings they have, or classrooms that they have, and then determines what the capacity is. From there, if you can read any of what's on the screen, you'll see that we come up with a percentage of utilization. Optimally, schools should be
Between about 95 and 100. So when we're working with the ministry, they're looking at that as kind of the sweet spot in terms of utilization to maximize the most efficient use of the space. So what we've done on this slide, and Jim has mentioned, is pretty tough to read, but we've highlighted the majority of the schools in the Sooke, in the Edward Milne zone. I think we've missed Poye, but that could be highlighted as well. And if you take a look at the second last column on the right-hand side, it has our existing utilization rates for those schools. So some of them are in the majority, or in that sweet spot. For example, John Muir is at about 97%. So that's a good optimal efficiency. Some of the other schools, such as Casinos and Journey, are a little bit light in terms of where they are from an optimal utilization size. So what we've done is, and through Bill's work, is cast that enrollment out for the next 10 years. So we're looking forward in kind of 5 and 10 year increments. So from the 2023 to 2028, we're looking at increasing the enrollment in those to get them past basically that optimal enrollment. So we'll be over 100% in the majority of those schools. So the purpose of the long-range facilities plan is to determine exactly when we'll reach those spots in order to be able to create our capital plan to submit to the ministry so we can have those spaces on board when we need the students, when the students show up. So district-wide, kind of cutting to the crash, we're looking at about adding 4,400 seats in the next 10 years. So that's for the entire district. Looking at some of the numbers for this zone, the Edward Milne zone, it's about 560 seats. So from a percentage standpoint, roughly 13% of our anticipated growth over the next 10 years will be in this zone. So our plan is being able to identify a number of spots where we will have to add additional spaces. We do have land close to the Sooke River and the Sun River development, so that's obviously a site for one of our elementary schools. But we'll also be looking at expanding both Journey and Edward Milne. So there's smaller increases. I think we're looking at increasing Journey, for example, about 125 seats, and at Edward Milne about 100 seats over that 5 to 10 year period. So through Bill's work, we've identified the growth is coming. It's just between kind of that 5 and 10 year period for this zone.
So when we do look at it, Harold alluded to that, we have to make significant plans for the growth of the entire school district. We're expecting about 4,400 kids in 10 years. That's going to be phenomenal growth. Right now, as a school district, we have over 50 portables in use. I think 54.
Yeah.
We have 20 we added last summer. We have another 5 coming this summer. We have schools, for example, Dunsmuir Middle School that has 13 portables, and it's just been through a renovation. We have Spencer Middle School, another example where it is 7 portables on it. We have Royal Bay Secondary School with 10 portables. So obviously there's places that are really high pressure, and we're trying to rationalize our entire school district as we go along. But the big news for us, I suppose, if I think about it, was that we have been expecting growth, but it's sustained growth. That was the message we received through Bill, is you can expect this to grow continuously for the next 2 decades. And so that really makes us have to think different and more long-term. Do you want to talk about housing starts?
Sure. So what's kind of driving those enrollment numbers, obviously, is the housing start. So through Bill's work, he's identified and had conversations with district staff around the anticipated growth within the municipality. So this is a part of the graph or part of the presentation that Bill made to the trustees that identified the growth areas, Sun River, and then the other parts of Sooke, looking at adding a total of 1,700 housing units in the future, and I believe that's still over that 10-year period. So as Jim had mentioned, the growth is not only sustainable, but it's been accelerated. We've seen throughout the district, on average, over the last 10 years, about 942 units starting each year. So through Bill's work and having those similar conversations with the other municipalities, looking at that number and a little bit higher over the next 10 years. So the growth that we've seen for the last decade is continuing into the future as well. So it's not only consistent, but it's accelerated in terms of what we've seen in the past and obviously throughout the rest of the province. So many conversations we have with district or ministry staff is around that growth and that it's coming. Previously, we've had discussions around if the growth is coming, if the enrollment is going to be there. I think we're past that part of the conversation, which is great with the ministry staff. It's now how much and when to be able to plan, because obviously government has a number of capital requests in throughout the rest of the school districts in the province and throughout government. So we are fighting for resources, minimal capital resources that we need to be able to, again, fund those seats.
So our forecast is great. The top graph shows 5 or 6 different sources. They're all going up. There seems to be a great similarity to it. Probably the only thing interesting from this graph that we're learning is that our secondary student growth over the next 10 years will be higher than our elementary. And that's simply because our elementary right now has been growing for the last 5 years. So that bubble will push through to where there's been lighter middle and secondary numbers. So the growth at those areas, which puts a bit pressure on middle and secondary schools in the future, and that's what we're planning for. We picked out Edward Milne and Sooke Elementary, and we're showing you 2 graphs here. The blue graph is Beauregard, which is commercial software that pretty well every school district in the province uses to project. And the red graph is Bill's work after he's gone and talked to municipal planners, done some work, talked to the development community, and has better local knowledge. And you can see there's quite a discrepancy there. We're looking at Edward Milne coming up to over, 750 kids. In the future, Sooke Elementary, which was Beauregard predicted to go down, is actually going to go up significantly, and we're looking at replacing and expanding that. But we'll get to that in a second. I think because of time, I'm going to skip this. Let's talk about what our plan is going forward. So, what we'd like to do in this family, we're recommending to the board, is to expand Edward Milne Secondary, which may require more land, although since we've recently started a partnership with Fred Milne Park, that may alleviate that. So we're going to do a project definition report on that in the near future to see what is the best route, but that's the possibility.
The next would be expanding Journey Middle, as I mentioned before, looking at the estimates over that 10-year period, looking at about 125 seats to the middle school. So as Jim mentioned, the kids in the elementary levels work their way through. We'll feel that pressure first at the middle, obviously, and then at the secondary level as well.
We're going to, we'd really like to get started on constructing a new, we call it Sooke River, it's in Sun River Estates, but an unnamed elementary school. We'd like it to be a large school. And a new school, and that's part of the plan. Also to replace Sooke Elementary School with a larger school. Likely that would be a complete replacement on site to the back of the property.
Part of the challenges are too with the capital plan with our aging assets are we have a facility condition index, so it measures the kind of the age and shape of each of our buildings, and both Sooke and John Muir are high on that list. So as we work our way through the capital planning process with ministry staff, we've identified those as possible replacements. The initial feedback that we're getting as we talk at the district level with ministry staff is that we've got a big capital ask out there. So it's going to be harder to get replaced schools where we're replacing seats when we really need to add seats. So again, that kind of has those replacement schools kind of falling down the priority list just for the sake of trying to maximize the capital dollars that we can receive from government.
So in our capital plan going forward, our preliminary numbers have the Sooke River Elementary classified as the 5th priority, and then a whole bunch at the Sooke Elementary Journey and Edward Milne expansion. I think we've actually moved Edward Milne expansion up, didn't we, at the last meeting from this. This is Bill's presentation, not ours. And then John Muir later on. Really, it doesn't matter once you get beyond number 5 what the order is. It's just indicating your priorities for the future and the next 10 to 20 years of planning. So what we have been doing in the last little while is focusing on maintaining our infrastructure. So the buildings, the assets that we have, that the board has in this community, we want to work on. And the board's directed us to put a significant amount of funds into these schools. Could you describe something?
Yeah, for sure. So the majority of the work obviously would be at Edward Milne at the secondary school level. So we've put about $2 million into the school, largely around the roof and boiler replacement, some of the social area outside the building that we've been able to enhance as well over the last 3 years. So did a quick summary of the totals of the capital improvements on that list today, and it's reaching about $3.6 million over the last 3 years of trying to get capital money back into the system to maintain those facility condition index that we talked about before. So this is kind of local capital money, or I call it minor capital money, that government provides us to be able to maintain the assets throughout the district.
Although some of the choices are the board's direct out of their operating budget. I mean, a good example is that Poirier drainage issue, and you may not know this, but Poirier's had a notoriously poor drained field. It's the largest elementary school we have. That takes away a play space for lots of kids every year. And the board directed us to put, I think it's almost $800,000 into that, where we're spending right now, into repairing that and making it more workable for students. So, just to review our priorities, it continues to be an elementary school site at Sooke River. The expansion and renovation of Edward Milne, we flipped those two back and forth as the highest priority. And as Harold said earlier, we're at the position where the ministry is not interested in renovating buildings for us. They know we're the fastest growing district, so they want us to add seats all the time. Sooke Elementary, Journey, and then John Muir. I think that's our presentation.
Yep.
Oh, the last thing is what we don't know, which is, you know, what will the road improvements to Highway 14 bring? You know, will sewers make any difference? Will there ever be a second route to Sooke? We hear a lot about development along West Coast Road further out, the economy and the real estate market, all the unknowns that could either really accelerate things or slow them down. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the presentation. Just a few comments, and then I have a question. Last year we met with the Minister of Education, and I thank you for taking the time and just for hearing sort of our plea from our community just with the growth and subsequent meetings with school trustees and the like. So I really appreciate the advocacy that is done, and also having our, I sort of thought for a while we're in the shadow of Langford, and what about our kids out here? So really glad to see that the new school on Sun River, and also plans for the others, just to get the kids off the highway, just because it's so dangerous. I don't see Casinos on there anywhere, and I'm just wondering, where does that fall in terms of the condition comparatively with some of the others?
That's a really good question. One of the, if you read through Bill's report, I think we're going to leave the entire report. He puts a bunch of suggestions on what we should be doing. One of the suggestions he's saying is give up Casinos for Sooke River Elementary School. Move Casinos basically to the Sooke River site, close that school. So give up a school of 110 kids to make it 400.
Okay.
That could be just as we move Belmont from the site that it currently is to its new site, it could be that kind of move. There's also some other things that I probably can't go in terms of other people's interest in to that piece of property.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And then this is part of a larger report that if we could have the PowerPoint maybe sent to members of council, and just so we have it, there's a lot of really interesting information in there in terms of growth and the like, and then the other report, if we could have that. I've taken some notes, but it's also helpful just to have the actual facts. So no, I really appreciate that. Councillor Reyes, comment or question?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the presentation. Always enjoy having you here. I think the new site in Sun River, putting that school, will really reduce the pressures on Sooke Elementary. I think it'll just be sort of like a sliding movement of the kids around, and I think that would be great for, because I noticed John Muir is at 97%, yet they're quite a ways down. So I'm thinking that with the site in Sun River, I think it's a lot of families move to Sun River expecting that school to be there. So I think it's quite exciting for our community to see a new school coming. So I'm thankful for that. Thank you.
Anything else? Councillor Casper?
Yeah, just through you to the presenters. Before any decisions are made to close Casinos or to make that shift, I'm sure there would be public consultation, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
It's required through law.
Right.
And as I said, I don't want to start a rumor that we're closing Casinos, because that's not at all what we're talking about. We need all the schools we have right now.
Right.
We would only move to do that if we were expanding to a larger site.
So, and secondly, just based on the current status of Sooke Elementary at 116%, right? It appears to have the highest need right now, correct?
That's right.
And because there's land available, is that pretty high up the list? I noticed that there was short, medium, and long-term actions, right? And I just can't recall if Sooke Elementary fit into
Sooke
the short.
is the medium. Our plan for
So it's medium?
Sooke would be to replace it with a larger school.
Yes.
As we said I think what Harold and I found out when we visited ministry staff was that last year in the province of British Columbia, one school was replaced. Only one out of all 60 school districts
Right.
for its condition. Pretty well every other major capital was about an investment in either seismic safety or expansion. And so we're looking at the expansion as our best opportunity to grow, and
Right.
so going to government and saying, by opening up 400 additional seats in Sooke, we're going to deal with the coming students that we know will be here. Because, Councillor Casper, if we started working on that school now, we'd be opening it 4.5 years from now.
Right.
And we know those students are coming, as Harold said earlier.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Follow-up, Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. What you've got it as short timing for the new school in Sun River. Any estimates on what that timing would look like? Like shovel in the dirt, or are we still not there yet?
The board doesn't control its own capital funding. Provincial government does. We put in the plan. Provincial government supports it, and as Harold said earlier, we have large asks right now. We have a crisis in the elementary system in the West Shore, or not the elementary middle right now, in terms of having 20 portable classrooms in 2 schools. That's almost a whole school in itself. So that's our highest priority right now, to get that finished. After that, we have these others, and we're hoping government will support them, but we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for this district. Not that we don't need it, because we do, but we're trying to also understand there's Surrey and Maple Ridge and some other growing communities.
We'll follow up with the ministers and the Premier to be sure of that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and many thanks to the trustees for all your work you do on our behalf. Very grateful. Okay, so moving on today, I'd like to welcome the representatives from the Capital Regional District forward, please. And we'll be discussing dogs and leashing. This is a follow-up to a request that came from a previous meeting of council. And what I suggest, council, just given the discussion that we may have, is I'd like to propose that council resolve into committee of the whole to allow for a more fulsome discussion of dog leashing in the CRD parks. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. And the reason for that is, you know, that the delegation in a regular council is a lot more structured. This will just allow for a bit more back and forth and a bit more opportunity to get clarity from members of the public and to have their questions heard or answered. So that's why I recommend that. So I'll call the question on that. All those in favor, opposed, and that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And welcome. If you'd like to bring another, is there just one member presenting?
My name is Larissa Hutchison. I'm the General Manager of Parks and Environmental Services with the Capital Regional District. And this is Mike McIntyre. He'll be making the presentation this evening. He's the Acting General Manager, or Acting Senior Manager of Regional Parks. And then I'll provide some support to Mike if there's some questions from the public or from council.
Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson, and welcome, Mr. Malkinson.
McIntyre.
McIntyre, pardon me. Okay. Okay, welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me today. As was mentioned, my name is Mike McIntyre. I'm the Acting Senior Manager for CRD Regional Parks. So I'm here today because Council requested that we provide some information on how the CRD is managing dogs in the regional parks and trails in the Sooke area, and what the process was for coming to the decisions around dog management. So, the direction for managing dogs in CRD parks and trails comes from management plans completed over the years for these areas. I will give you a short summary of the management planning process for Sooke Hills Wilderness, C2C Sooke Potholes, Kapur, AM Creek, and the Galloping Goose Regional Trail, including the consultation that was done about dog management. I will then talk about the rationale for the management direction that came out of those plans and what we are trying to accomplish by having dogs be on leash in these areas. Finally, I will talk about the actions we are taking now to implement the direction in these CRD board-approved policies. So the first management plan we completed for this area was for Sooke Hills Wilderness Regional Park. This park was established through an agreement with the province to ensure the protection of the Greater Victoria water supply area. That is the overriding priority for managing this park. The planning process started in 1999 with the first round of public consultation that included a public meeting and the circulation of a newsletter to the public with a questionnaire. This was followed in 2000 by a second round of consultation to get feedback on the draft management plan that also included public meetings, newsletters, and questionnaires. The draft management plan included a proposal that dogs be required to be on leash in the park. 71% of those who responded to the question about whether dogs should be on leash in the park supported the proposed management direction. 21% opposed it. The CRD started the management planning process for the C2C, Sooke Potholes, AM Creek, and Kapur Regional Parks in 2006. Again, there were 2 rounds of public consultation for this process. The first to identify interests and issues in the 4 parks, and the second to review the draft management plan for those parks. There was also a management plan advisory group that was active during the entire planning process. That included a representative of Sooke Council. The first round of consultation happened in 2006. There were 3 public meetings held across the region, including one in Sooke, which over 100 people attended. The second round of consultation was in 2009, 2010, to review the draft management plan. This included a public meeting in Sooke, which 32 people attended. People were also able to fill out comment forms online. Staff also made a presentation on the draft plan to the District of Sooke Council in January of 2010. The draft management plan included the proposal that dogs be on leash in C2C, Sooke Potholes, and AM Creek parks. Dog management was not a big issue during the planning process, but most of the comments we got back about dogs favored having dogs on leash in the parks to protect wildlife and the environment. The management plan for the Galloping Goose Trail was completed in 2016 as part of the Regional Trails Management Plan. The planning process started in 2013 with a survey of trail users. Better dog management was one of the issues respondents identified that would improve their experience on regional trails. This was followed by 2 rounds of public consultation, the first to gather ideas from the public about how the trail should be managed, and the second to review the draft management plan. The first round of the process included 3 open houses, one in Langford, Sydney, and Victoria, and online comment forms. A second set of open houses was held to review the draft management plan. Online comment forms were also available. Nearly 600 responses were received during this process. The draft management plan included the proposal to have dogs on leash on regional trails. 75% of respondents supported the strategic policies in the draft plan. The draft management plan was referred to all municipalities for comment. So it's important to remember that we do not manage for one dog or for your dog, but for the hundreds or thousands of dogs that visit our parks hundreds of times each year. Regional parks and trails are home to many species of wild plants and animals. Although a dog's curiosity and playfulness may seem harmless, it can have serious consequences for wild creatures which need to conserve their energy for feeding, breeding, and nesting. Off-leash dogs have been known to chase bears, make them rush towards other people further up a trail, or bring them back to you when the bear decides to give chase. And in fact, just recently we had a case of a bluff charge on Mount Manuel Quimper. That was involving a man with a dog off leash and a bear that charged them. Ground nesting birds and small animals can be frightened or even killed off by off-leash dogs running through the underbrush. These sorts of damages are out of sight, and they happen without our knowledge. Also, dogs urinating in sensitive habitats can mark the area, causing wildlife to be deterred from using the area. So as you are aware, we have implemented the restrictions identified in our board-approved park management plans by amending the Regional Parks Regulation bylaw. Signs indicating dogs must be on leash have been installed in parks where the bylaw is in effect. Park officers and dog officers are patrolling these areas, engaging dog owners to inform them of the regulatory changes and to help answer any questions people might have about why these changes have gone into effect. Our goal is to have dog owners voluntarily follow the park rules. We are only issuing warning notices at this time. Our staff are collecting observational data on dog use in regional parks, and this data will help inform future management decisions. I want to thank you for your time this evening, and this concludes this presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much for attending. So as I saw in the last PowerPoint then, so far it's just been, the role has been more of a information type from the staff presence, and that there's been just some written warnings, I see, and no fines.
Yeah, our main objective through this initial time period is to engage people in the parks, let them know about the new regulations, talk to them about the rationale behind them, really seek voluntary compliance with those regulations. Compliance is a hard word. We want people to follow the rules, so we want to make sure that they're aware of the rules and why they're in place.
Okay. Questions from members of council on this? Councillor Ray, then Casper.
Thank you for your presentation and through your worship. So what I gather from the presentation then is you did the C2C management plan back in 2006, 2009, and that includes the Sooke potholes, which is roughly kilometer 46 to 56.
Okay.
You can tell I actually know that stretch quite well. So that's differentiated. It's still part of the Galloping Goose Trail. Yes. But you've got a Galloping Goose management plan that you did more recently that involved Langford, Sydney, and Victoria. So I take it that top end of the Galloping Goose is actually part of your C2C management plan, because you said the Sooke potholes.
So we differentiate between the Sooke potholes and the Galloping Goose Regional Trail. The Galloping Goose Regional Trail, the ENN Regional Trail, and the Lochside Regional Trail are all part of a management plan that is the Regional Trails Management Plan. So Sooke potholes is part of the C2C Blue-Green Belt Management Plan, which is a management plan that covers 4 separate parks: Kapur, AM Creek, C2C, and Sooke potholes.
Okay, so please bear with me because I'm just having a bit of trouble. So okay. Are you talking about, when you're talking about the Sooke potholes, that's if they're down at the potholes but not on the Galloping Goose?
Yes, but both of them have leash regulations. So
the reason I raise it is I and I'm not shooting the messenger. I'm an avid user of that trail for years, maybe not so much in the last 8 months. But the input that's going into that area was done in 2006 and 2009. I've been on, this is my second term, and have had no engagement with the CRD coming to council on this area. I can, from my experience of riding the Galloping Goose from about 48.5 to 56, right up to Leachtown, almost 3 or 4 times a week, month in and month out, every month of the year. I have no idea why it would need to be on leash. There are the people that are up there are really very few during the morning when people are riding, and I'm just concerned that we've sort of done a blanket brush from one end of the Goose to the other. You've got over 56 kilometers, and each of the areas may have different issues and needs. But I can tell you from my experience over the last 5 years, using that on a daily, weekly basis, there's no need for our community not to be able to take their dogs up there off leash. There's nobody there. I can tell you at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning, the only people at at 54 or 55 is the two people I ride with, a husband and a friend. So I think what I would like to see is some rethinking about maybe there's opportunities in places rather than the sweeping requirement to have all the dogs on leash, to take a look at having some other options to be considered. And, you know, one might be from 48 onwards, you can have your dogs off leash. Or if you're concerned about the summertime and campers that are using the upper campground there that the Sooke Nation are running, maybe you don't want dogs off leash after 10 o'clock in the morning. I'd like to see some dialogue about some options to help our community resolve this, because I think this sweeping brush is creating a lot of problems in our community with our dog owners. So that's just my comment.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Casper, please.
Yeah, through you to Mr. McIntyre, is it possible for you to give some insight as to incidents or issues that have occurred in the parks other than what you had mentioned, either through SPCA comments or any matters that have been brought to your attention? And also some of the issues that have been raised in other regional parks in regard to conflicts with dogs, horses, cyclists, what have you. Island View Beach in particular, because I know that that's been a topic or a debate going on for almost 5 years between conflicts and uses and activities.
Certainly. I want to be careful to not try to categorize dog issues based on anecdotal evidence. So that's we are currently in a process. We've hired a dog officer. We applied for some funding from the board and received funding this year to put towards putting more resources into the field to look at dog issues and to capture those issues through surveying, through observational data, and we're using a very good process to capture that information. So I think what we recognize is that while anecdotally we know that dog issues are one of our top issues that we get coming into our office for complaints and what have you, we also know that we have an awful lot of people that use the parks for dog walking. And so, you know, whether the percentage of the number of issues is you know, a high percentage of the usership, it's really hard to say. So in 2019, our intention is to take all that information and report back to the board with some recommendations to help guide dog management into the future. Certainly, we recognize that, and as the previous presenters showed, the growth of the area it means more people using the parks. It means more users. It means more dogs. We have to be planning for that for the future and for the level of use that we anticipate we'll see in these parks, as opposed to maybe the level of use we have right now. So I would like to, you know, I think for us the process of going through this year and doing that observational data and then reporting back, we'll have a much more complete and a picture of what's actually going on in the parks, in the regional parks.
Not trying to put you on the spot. So the door's not 100% closed. This is an observation time. This is a written warning time. There's no tickets being issued. And then whatever not anecdotal, but actual evidence or information that you gather will then be brought forward to Regional Parks Committee and then ultimately the board in 2019, correct?
We'll report back to the board on dog management issues. Currently, the Regional Parks Regulatory Bylaw has dog leash regulations in place for for the parks that we're talking about today, as do the management plans for those parks indicate that dogs have to be on leash. So in order to change that, there would need to be a process that would involve the board. That would be a board direction.
Councillor Loggins, then Pearson.
Thank you. Thanks for coming today. I know this is not like the most fun topic to talk to us about at council, but I really do appreciate your time here. I'm just confused about why the change was made to put dogs on leash in those areas before you have any evidence-based facts.
So what I can say is through the management planning process, the issue of dogs on leash did come up, and we do have there are some best management practices. So if you look at provincial parks or national parks, large landscapes, wilderness areas, generally there's no provincial parks or national parks where dogs are allowed to be off leash. And so, we do have a sense of the best management practices for areas with wildlife. We do know that we've seen in other parks some of the damage that is caused by high volumes of dogs being off leash, whether it's erosion of different areas or whether it's disturbance of wildlife. So it's not that we don't have information or that we don't have access to research, and that through our public consultation process, there was also that identification of that issue. But we also have other areas where we're going to need to make decisions about dog regulations, other parks that are going to require some dog management decision making. And so part of what we need to do is look at what is going on, being able to capture with data, that scientific data, what's going on in these particular parks. But using a precautionary approach to management planning, generally best management practices are, if you're looking to protect the environment and we're looking at wilderness class parks, it is to require dogs to be on leash as a precautionary measure.
And I understand that. I'm just confused about why money is being put on acquiring that evidence when the decision has already been made. So that's a bit confusing to me. I do find it great that you are looking past the anecdotal evidence and trying to get some more statistics, but I don't think, to me it feels like you're trying to get statistics that support your move already, not necessarily to make educated decisions since the decision's already been made. And the responses, again, 600 responses, I don't expect you to know this off the top of your head, but I do wonder how many of them were actually from Sooke, because those consultations did take place both online but also in 3 communities that are not here. So I do wonder how many were actually from our community. And again, everyone's going to report a dog bite, but no one's going to report the dog that just passes by, right? So it is disappointing to me because, I completely understand the wildlife side of it, and I do support that, definitely. But it's difficult because I no longer use CRD parks because I have been in 2 car accidents in the past 2 years, and I haven't been able to hold my dog on a leash. He's 140 pounds, so he weighs more than I do. And I want to go bike riding with him, and I can't anymore, so I don't use your parks. But I do want to see the results of that information, and I imagine it would support what has already been done. I'm just also curious as to why funding is being put in that direction once the decision's already made.
I can speak to that a little bit in that we do have 31 regional parks and 3 regional trails. So I'm aware that we're speaking about 4 parks and 1 regional trail here tonight that are of particular interest to Sooke. But our dog management our approach to dog management from a systems perspective. Certainly in other parks in the system, we are still tackling some of these issues around dog management, and some of them aren't as easy with respect to the wildlife aspect. It's user conflicts and protection of the environment from erosion and dog feces and those sorts of issues. So there's still a lot of work that we have to do to work through dog management in the rest of the system as well.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, then Parkinson, then I'll go back to Ray.
Thank you, and a lot of the comments I think that I said have been said by my fellow councillors. So through the chair to you, thanks for coming tonight. And I know it's you're a bit of a hot seat because we're there, but I guess for me it feels sort of counterintuitive when we talk about 5 parks in our area that were broad brushed. The signs went up somewhere in March or somewhere, I think they were in March, and there was a soft launch, and then all of a sudden people started noticing the signs, and then all of a sudden started raising issues, to their local officials, which wasn't you, it was us at this council table. I think there's opportunity, and I don't know what your chances are of going back to the board, of revisiting the blanket approach. I heard Councillor Ray talk about that earlier. There's areas of the regional trail, I think, that are well suited to off-leash. I think the potholes are suited to off-leash up at the top end. I think that Whiff and Spit, which is not your park, would be way better with the leash on. But there's people in Sooke that would probably disagree with me on that. So I guess I'm struggling with the blanket approach. It feels very, very counterintuitive to me that we're not given any opportunity for some off-leash parks in your announcement. That's the part I'm struggling with. I think that locally, we've traditionally had access to many of these areas you're talking about. You go up Mount Quimper, as you said, and there's a bluff charged by a bear. Well, I've seen numerous bears on Mount Quimper. And yes, they kind of act different at different times, but it's generally not the dog, it's the humans that kind of bug them more than their dogs. That's an excellent opportunity for dogs being off leash, and I'm hearing about the wildlife thing, so I'm taking away some different thoughts tonight. But wide open spaces with not many people seem to be, in my mind, the best places to take your dogs. The Galloping Goose Trail, Councillor Ray will tell you, my wife walks there 5 times or 6 times a week, and quite often you don't see anybody in that 4 or 5 kilometer walk back and forth. So I think I'm struggling with that kind of blanket approach to it.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship, I was just wondering, when the plan that's in place now, did it go to the CRD board for approval by all members?
Yes.
So then what was the vote from the table of all our politicians sitting there that gave the go-ahead to this?
I don't
How'd
have,
we
I don't
vote
have that
in
answer.
Sooke on this issue?
Well, which one are you talking about? Because this plan,
For the leashes, right?
but that was adopted back in 2016. The Galloping Goose Management Plan was 2016, and then the initial one started back in 2001.
Correct, Your Worship, but the
So-
signs just went up in March.
So that was the regulatory one that came forward recently, and that's just adding in a bit of compliance to what was already existing, and I think it was unanimous.
So it was unanimous by by the board.
I think so.
Through your worship, I can't recall, I can't confirm that that's the case, but we can certainly look at the minutes.
Well, that's good to know how everybody that sat around the table who brought this into place voted, and our council, so that we should have been informed as a council before it goes out to the public. So we should be taking responsibility for that ourselves and not laying it on anybody else. I'd like to say that I'm the only one sitting at this table who doesn't have a dog. Everybody else here does. I have more of interest in the wildlife, is what my concern is. And when Councillor Pearson just spoke about Whiff and Spit, it really bothers me that dogs are allowed to chase birds and all the animals down there. So that would be my concern in all the parks and down the on Down the Goose and things like that. So I think we have to be responsible and be mindful of wildlife. We continue building in our town, pushing the animals further out, yet we allow everybody to run rampant out there. So I think we have to take a look at it and see what can be done, not necessarily a broad stroke, whatever, but we really have to be mindful of everybody that lives here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just to add, this went through the Regional Parks Committee, and it has a fulsome conversation there. So it would have been debated at the committee, and then that committee report comes to the board. So there is two-step there. Councillor Casper attended the Parks Committee. He might have more insight on what that debate looked like. He can speak if he wants to, but I'll leave it at that. I'm going to go to Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess the difficulty I'm having with the conversation is that when this went to the CRD board, the two pieces, the Sooke Hills and the C2C, were really outdated. And public consultation in 2009, and it's 2018. The dynamic, there's a huge shift in terms of who we now have in our community and using the parks. I don't know if you can answer this, but I've been approached a number of times while I've been on the Goose, and is that people believe that the fact that you've started to implement a warning system and put the signs up was because there were complaints from the racing cyclists community. I don't know if that's true or not, but one thing I will say, I'll tell you, they scare us more than any dogs that are wandering off leash. I have to say that. But my last comment is there any appetite to come back to Sooke and have another public consultation, something that's more current? I can see we have a number of people that are here in the audience tonight that are part of our dog community that use the area up there. And I can tell you, before 10 o'clock in the morning, there's no wildlife except the odd one, and there's no people other than the odd person that's got their dog and a few of us who are riding our bikes. So I would really like to see another public consultation come back to our community before we start implementing anything that's off-leash or on-leash. Thank you.
Is there anything else from members of Councillor Parkinson? Did you have a follow-up? Okay. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I thought I saw Larissa's hand.
I just want to see if there's anything, questions for Mr. McIntyre, and then Ms. Hutchinson can speak, and then we can open it up for members of the public. But we only have one chair there, so I'm just trying to work this out. Okay. Ms. Hutchinson, if you would like to maybe, just because there's only one microphone, if you don't mind coming forward and taking Mr. McIntyre's seat. Thank you.
Through Your Worship, I just had a couple of comments as I was listening to the questions back and forth. We just did a very comprehensive survey of visitors to our parks, not just on dogs, but their experiences in the parks. It was a statistically relevant survey. What we heard is that about 35% of people that come to our parks come with dogs. But we also know that 35% of folks are not coming to parks because of all the dogs that are in parks, whether they're on or off leash. So dogs in parks is certainly something that we know can be divisive within the community. We've certainly seen that at Island View Beach. It's been a very challenging process for quite a number of different reasons, but I think the dogs and dog management at that parks has really been a catalyst for us to be talking more about dog management, and that's what's led us to come back with a dog management plan for 2019. I am quite reluctant to come back on the promise of more consultation because we do have a management plan that's been adopted. We're more than happy to come out for public information meetings to exchange ideas. But to bring back a meeting on the basis of consultation, I think, would maybe set up expectations that we can't meet. So I would suggest that if Council is thinking that any of these management plans need to be reviewed, that a formal motion from Council would come into our board, and that would generate, a process for staff to come back under a different mandate with the community.
Thank you for clarifying that, Ms. Hutchinson. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, then then if council, and based on any views that we do here, that it's also feasible for us to make a recommendation to CRD Parks and the board that perhaps we should be looking at perhaps some designated free run areas or areas for dogs to run, which do exist. Elk Beaver Lake has an area that was clearly identified in the early 80s when I was first on the regional board as a designated area for dogs to run, and it's all fenced and got blackberries and everything. None of that was cut down to help keep the dogs in that area. So, I know, and it's a pickup from what Councillor Ray had mentioned, was that there perhaps are stretches of the Galloping Goose that could accommodate similar dog run areas. I know not too far from where I live, adjacent to the Butler Pit, is a very lengthy stretch, which you can clearly see from one end to the other. Is there any dogs coming? Are there any people coming with dogs? And I know that's been the practice, that usually when people come forward with each other's dogs, they don't know the temperament of the dog, and they immediately call the dog back and put it on leash just as a precaution. It's kind of a common sense approach, right? And I hope that during these discussions or information gathering, that those are some factors that could be taken into account. I think, for all intents and purposes, the vast majority of people want to do the right thing. And they want to have adequate control, proper control of their animals, right? Whether it's on leash or on leash. But there are those few rotten apples who could care less. They don't care if their dog's running at large. They feel free to ride their bike and let their dog run at large, come what may. And I've experienced things like that. I'm sure others have. But, that's the problem with having these types of rules, is that it's to deal with problems. And, I would hope during these discussions or information gathering that an approach could take place for some ideas as to what could be done. So I just leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Casper. Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. I'd just like to invite members of the public who would like to comment on this matter. If you could please come forward if you would like. It's specific to this item on the agenda, and that would be this item. If we could just have your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Phil Rosner, 2836 Sooke River Road. Thank you, Your Worship, members of the council. I've lived on Sooke River Road for the last year and a half since moving from a different area in Sooke, and I take my dog up via a side trail to the Galloping Goose probably 3 times a week. And Mr. McIntyre mentioned signs. I've never seen a sign. In fact, this issue only came to my attention about a month ago. I didn't know that there was an issue with that. The other thing which I noticed today is from the gallopinggoosetrail.com site with regards to trail etiquette and tips. It says, keep dogs under control or on a leash and please pick up after your pets. Okay, and lastly, I would just like to offer up the following bit of research. In the run-up to Boulder, Colorado's off-leash licensing program, animal behavior scientist Mark Beckhoff studied the behavior of dogs in the area. His 2 papers on the subject are probably the most thorough studies ever conducted on the impact of dogs on their environment. The studies and conclusions: as Beckhoff states, behavioral data showed that off-leash dogs generally did not travel far off-trail, that when they did, it was for short periods of time, and that they rarely were observed to chase other dogs, disturb people, chase wildlife, destroy vegetation, or enter bodies of water. People are more disruptive to the environment than dogs. The well-being and interests of dogs should not be summarily and dismissively be compromised when dogs and people attempt to share a limited space. He also concluded that it's people, not dogs, who are the problem. Even in surveys administered to non-dog owners, the general opinion overwhelmingly indicated that it was people, not dogs, who were causing most of the problems. However, having your dog off-leash means you do need to be responsible, and there absolutely are places that dogs should not be off-leash, of course. And there are places dogs should not be at all. But there are also areas where human children should not be permitted to wander unsupervised, and areas where humans should not tread at all. But just like laws that govern people are written to respect the decision-making powers of reasonable humans, laws that govern dogs should also allow for the reasonable person and his or her dog. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosner. Other comments from members of the public? No, just need to turn on the button at the base, please.
My name is Phoebe Dunbar, and I've been on the trail probably for about 5 years. I've ridden it, and I recognize some of the councillors who've been there too. But I did just want to make one comment. I think it's so important when you, Mike, and some of your staff...
Sorry, can you direct your comments to me? Thank you, Phoebe. Ms. Dunbar.
Okay. I think it's really important if there is this observation phase and some of the CRD staff or contractors are up there, it's so important for us users to be a part of that. We're the ones there almost on a daily basis. And I can also say that of all the days and weeks, all seasons up there, I've never seen a conflict with other dogs. And I think it's because a lot of us as dog owners communicate to people who are coming and going. We call out to bicyclists that we're going to pass them, or we always call out, is your dog friendly? And as some of you have witnessed, most people leash their dog if there's any concern. I haven't seen any conflict there, and I know there's a lot of users here this evening. I know they haven't either. And I really hope the observation phase produces some good information from the users and the people that live here in Sooke, and they're a part of that whole culture of that upper part of the trail. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dunbar.
Good evening, Derek Lewis, 5526 Sooke Road. I think that the CRD could take a lesson from maybe what the school board showed us on that very, very large geographical map, where one size doesn't fit all, and different areas are growing at different rates. So just because the Galloping Goose Trail is all in the CRD, it doesn't mean that what works down beside Douglas Street, where they have a traffic counter with 1,200 bikes a day, would necessarily go to the Galloping Goose Trail at the potholes, where there's maybe a half a dozen users in a day. The one-size-fit-all would be like 30 kilometers an hour down on Douglas Street. The City of Victoria wants to slow people down. It's a 4-lane highway. The Coquihalla Highway's a 4-lane highway. It's 120. So I think they really have to take a look at not one-size-fits-all. And at the CRD board table, we also have to appreciate that it's mostly represented by the urban mayors and councils. The rural voice of Sooke, Langford, and West Shore is not really well represented. And so when they're sitting at the committee meetings and they're sitting at their board meetings, our voice is not the one that's heard. And even if it is a loud voice, you're still going to lose the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lurs. Other speakers?
Gail Hall, 2517 Sooke River Road. I had this ready for the public question and comment period, but there was one part of the master plan that, or actually the bylaw, which I was bothered by, and I'll just probably read it right out. And it's talking about animals in the park, I think. Yeah. And it's about, it says, to restrict the area where a commercial dog walker may walk dogs, limit the number of dogs allowed per commercial dog walker to a maximum of 8, and may require the dogs to be on a leash held by a commercial dog walker. Now that is the kind of thing that brings my blood to a boil, because I have seen those 8 dogs up there many times from different dog walkers. They're not on a leash, and they run all over, and they scare the daylights out of on my dog, maybe she's a bit chicken, but she's also very quiet. So why do we have to put one dog on a leash when they can run 8 off? If somebody can answer that for me, it would be nice. And I have some other comments. I've got, after studying all the CRD documents I could get my hands on, it becomes clear that the rule is in place on all trails operated by the CRD, and therein lies the problem. Because all trails are not the same. There are urban trails and rural trails. Trails that carry folks into city for work, trails that meander through residential areas, and trails that are at home in the wilderness. So how can you put rules down on trails when they're not equal? I mean, sure, when your dog, if you're walking your dog on a trail in Victoria, best you put it on a leash. Out on the Potholes Park, there's probably nobody around for a mile, and your dog will stay with you and wander off, and this whole thing is really bothering me. It's certainly easier to make signs in a one-suits-all design so that you can say dogs must be on a leash, and you can plant those in every park that you go to, whether it's in Victoria or up in the potholes somewhere. It's just not proper to put the same rules on every park because the parks are all different. If you take from October through till March, sometimes when you're up there you're feeling a little bit lonely because there's nobody up there. And those months you could walk 65 dogs and nobody would be bothered by them. As far as wildlife is concerned, I've only been walking it for 30 years, and I used to start at home on River Road and walk all the way up to Mr. Ewan's lodge. And wildlife, I've seen, over 30 years, I've seen 2 cougars, a few bears, and I'm just starting to see deer now when we're supposed to be causing all sorts of trouble up there. I saw a deer with two fawns the other day, and I thought, oh, that's the first time. So, you know, all of these comments that are made, they sound great, but they're not true. And I'll say I agree without question that dog owners must be responsible and diligent with respect to their animals' conduct. However, folks that are frightened of dogs must remember that when they come into a rural park, a dog may quickly become their best friend. Dogs are alert to their surroundings. They have a way of issuing a warning and will quickly tell you to turn and retreat. I think that the fact that these rules are put on every park to apply to every dog is simply not acceptable because, as I say, through most of the year at the Potholes Park, you could walk all day and never see another person or another dog. I think we need to stand our ground and ask for something better. I was really happy when the CRD purchased that property. Now, frankly, I wish they would go away.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. I'll just finish with members of the public. Okay, if you can keep that answer, just there may be others. Do I have other members of the public that would like to speak on this side? Welcome.
Hi, I'm Alicia Erskine. I live at 2752 Woodhaven. I'm kind of curious as to why, like C2C and the Sooke Wilderness, Galloping Goose, isn't being treated the same as, say, Sooke Park or Thetis. It's all a CRD regional park, and there it's off-leash and under control. I'm kind of curious why previously with the bylaw they weren't out there enforcing that dogs be under control if they came across one that wasn't, and then now all of a sudden it's on leash and enforcing that. I have dogs myself, and I used to go to Mount Quimper or Peden Lake, and just about a month ago was stopped by 2 bylaw officers who told me I need to leash my dogs. When I saw them, I immediately called my dogs over. They came. It was a very great example of under-control dogs. So it's interesting that they can't be out there enforcing dogs that would be out of control. And then that way, the people who are the irresponsible dog owners, they're getting punished versus those with responsible dogs, who are responsible dog owners. When I had talked to CRD, they had said that a big complaint was, dog owners not picking up after their dogs in the parks, yet they stopped having waste bags in the parks because it would cost them, it was something roughly $1,200 a year, but then they were asking for $100,000 for the year to have someone in the parks to enforce the new bylaw. So these are things that are a concern to me that, we now don't have that many parks to go to. I'd have to drive to East Sooke Park, but I live now just in Shirley, so I'm having to drive, 45 minutes to an hour when I am the example of a responsible dog owner with dogs that are under control. When I also had called after I had been stopped by the bylaw officers, and I talked to someone at CRD, they said, well, if your dog is under control, why can't it just be on a leash if it's that close to you? And I'm like, well, if my dog's within 10 feet of me and on the trail, and they're not even chasing wildlife, because again, under control would mean your dog isn't chasing wildlife, you have them under control. Out of control would be that example. So it's just something that I've been concerned about.
Okay, we can get some answers to your questions just after we have some more public.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do I have other members of the public that would like to comment or have questions on this?
Val Scott, 2042 Stonehearth. I'm flying by the seat of my pants here because I wasn't expecting that the public was going to be commenting on this. I've heard a few things tonight that I'm finding distressing. The CRD is mentioning management and safety of the wildlife, keeping the parks in good order and not, abused or overrun or destroyed by humans and animals. And all of that is certainly the way we all want to see that park. We've all been up there for probably as many years as all of us have lived in Sooke. For me, it's been since 1980, morning and evening, up walking potholes, Goose Trail, Wilderness Park, all over the hills of Sooke for a very long time, seeing the good and the bad of the dogs, the good and the bad of the people, the good and the bad of the traffic. And I think that's where tonight I haven't heard any mention. There is a campground up at the end of the potholes, as we all know. The speed limit on that road was dropped a few years ago down to 20. And yet, I can't count on my hand more than 1 or 2 cars that I ever see doing that 20 speed limit. To me, that means those speeding cars are more of a detriment to the wildlife that is in that park. They're more of a detriment to the people that are in that park. And just the dust and dirt alone, the clouds that go through that park, that when you're walking any of the side trails, whether it's the Goose above that road or the river trail below that road, there's times where I literally cannot breathe without coughing because the dirt load and the dust load travels a huge distance off of that gravel road. It has even now, and that campground just opened in May, so totally covered the foliage along both sides of that road and both sides of that trail that they look like they've been sprayed with concrete dust. So to me, looking after that park should ensure that that park stays alive. It looks like walking death when you walk through that park. That's not what I went out to enjoy the park about. I went out there to enjoy every bush, every shrub, every river, every fish, every bear, every cougar. And I take 4 dogs with me that I own that are very well trained. They're all sheep working dogs. They work at distance of acres away from me. And yet, if they're 30 feet away from me on that trail, someone says, your dog's not in control. If I can work those dogs across acres of field amongst lambs and ewes and rams and have no issues, I find it extremely rude and obnoxious to be told that because your dog is this distance away or that distance away or somebody else's dog is that distance away, that they're out of control. When most of those dogs I see can be whistled and called into their owners as soon as they hear something. Today I was on the trail. The dogs were playing recall games right around me as I'm walking. All of a sudden, there's a CRD 4-wheel drive Spider, or whatever the heck that is, on the trail, slap bam behind me that I did not even hear. No horn, no noise, no anything. And I looked over my shoulder to see it coming. And I will say, thankfully, the 2 fellows driving it were gracious enough and smart enough to slow right down. My dogs were whistled in to a lie down on the side of the trail, and the guys thanked me for having well-behaved dogs, went along slowly behind me. But I wonder how many other people who are out on that trail when the trucks and the workers get out there have the same problem that I do with a hearing issue that get surprised like that. I was more scared of that vehicle coming around the bend behind me than I've ever been of a bear 15 feet away. So there's both sides of the coin being flipped here, and I really feel that the dog walkers are being flipped to the underground rather than all of the picture of our beautiful parks being looked at. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you for attending, Ms. Scott. Do I have any other speakers from the public? Any questions, comments? No? Okay, you'll need to come forward to the microphone. Can you wait till you get to the microphone? Introduce yourself.
Good evening, Diane Bernard, 2018 Penang Road. I'd like to speak about this dog management issue. However, my specific issue relates to a municipal park, not to a CRD park. So I wanted to just get clarification around that.
So our discussion tonight is really about the CRD
parks.
Yeah, the
Okay.
CRD specific parks. That's why the delegation was called, and sort of that's our topic
Right.
of conversation.
I'll arrange a delegation later. Thank you.
Thank you. You could also feel free to email or write to us, and then it would be a correspondence item as well that we could receive at a council meeting, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, Albedo's 2330 Carpenter Road. I guess my concern is that who are the CRD parks supposed to serve? It's supposed to serve the people. And I have to say that 90% of the people that use the Galloping Goose Trail from Gillespie Road to the potholes are Sooke people. I would say easily 90%, especially from October to March. Little less in the summer when some cyclists are up there. So if those are the people that the CRD are serving, I don't think they're serving us correctly. I mean, there should be some consultation with us on the use of that park. And for the 28 years I've been in Sooke, and the many, many hours I spent on that trail, I have yet to see a great dog problem. The people that walk their dogs are the nicest people. They have the most control of their animals. So I would like to see Sooke people have some say in the use of that trail. And I'm really concerned about blanket control from downtown Victoria for a very rural park. So I'd like to see us have another look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beddoes. Are there any final comments?
Hi, I'm Lisa Colbert, 116 2260 Maple Avenue North. I just have a quick comment in addition to all the really good comments tonight. I did a walk to Grassy Lake and Peden Lake with some friends. I have a new SPCA dog, so she's on leash for at least 6 months, working on the recall. That was a wicked walk. I wouldn't do it again. It's very unsafe. Those trails are very vigorous, and to be on leash, well, maybe that's the intention. Less traffic in the backwoods. And also, now that my dog is on leash, because she's a new dog, the bikes are going very fast. They see my dog's on leash, so they're whizzing past me extremely quickly. Am I allowed to say slow down? I don't know. Just a comment.
Thank you, Ms. Kohlberg.
Ellen Lords, 5526 Sooke Road. Just to add to that comment, is one of the things that's really upsetting on the trail is you do have those people come whizzing by on their bikes. And why is there not a rule passed that all cyclists have to have bells? Because you don't hear them coming. They come up behind you. They scare the dickens out of you. If it's an elderly person or a young person, they should have bells. And I think that should be put into there. Again, consultation with local folks, because we're the ones that are exposed to it. But if anything is done, the bells should be on those bikes, and because they just whip by and get the dog excited too. And the cyclist might think it's a dog attacking, where it's just the dog is startled, just like the people are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lurs. Typically, you should be calling out on your left if you're on a bike, and if you don't have a bell, then it would be a verbal. That's sort of the rule, trail use anywhere. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that is the rule for cyclists. I don't have a bell on my bike, but I call out. Anyway, anyone else from the public that would like to comment or ask a question? Any comments or questions from council? I just wanted to give the CRD delegation time to respond, but I just wanted to see if there were any comments or questions. Okay, go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a brief comment, because it was raised that most of us do have dogs. My dog's always on a leash, so even though I advocate, I want to make sure it's clear that my dog's always on a leash, but I feel the top end of the goose, we really need to rethink that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Ms. Hutchinson, you had a few answers to a few questions. Could I just invite you back to the chair with the microphone? There was a couple, mainly on the piece from Ms. Hall, just about why the commercial walkers differ. Mm-hmm. And then also just there was a comment why these parks are different than those parks.
So through your worship, I just want to acknowledge and thank everybody that's made comments tonight. I do appreciate coming out and listening to people share their concerns, share their observations about the parks. It's really useful for us. I've made a number of notes, and certainly we'll be taking that back into the work that we're doing at CRD. There was a question, you're right, from, I believe her name is Mrs. Hall, about why commercial dog walkers don't have to follow the regulatory bylaw for on-leash. Certainly if they're in a park that has a bylaw for on-leash, then the dogs must be on-leash. And if they're in an area where there would be restrictions for dogs to be on-leash in certain areas or under control, then that would be the regulatory scheme that they would be following. There was another question about why these parks in particular have on-leash requirements. I think in part it's because of the nature of the large wilderness landscape parks. We did have individual management planning processes, rigorous processes for each of these parks. So from my perspective, certainly it hasn't been a blanket approach to the parks out in this vicinity. I think it's just the general nature of the very large landscape parks with wildlife and other factors that have led us to the regulatory pieces that are in place. Why not Thetis and East Sooke Park was a question. I know Thetis Lake in particular has been a park that's been particularly difficult for us with dogs not under control. Lots of commercial dog walkers in Thetis Lake. Lots of comments. And complaints about that park in particular. So I would suggest that along with Island View Beach, has been one park that we've been talking about at the Parks Committee that's really led us to have the funding in place, to have bylaw and service level adjustments so that we can be out educating folks and observing what's happening, and also is driving us towards maybe a more comprehensive dog management policy that Mr. McIntyre referred to for 2019. So with that, I'll just leave you with that further context.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hutchinson. So just to clarify then, in terms of going forward, so this year, as I understand from the presentation, there would be sort of the review of everything, and then with the intent that in 2019 there would be recommendations back to the board on what the findings are from this year of observation. However, council could also put forward a motion with notice or a notice with motion it would go to Parks Committee first, that could then give some feedback and some context.
Through your worship, yes, that's certainly the case. When observations come back in 2019, there may be draft recommendations that come forward. I would suggest that it's highly likely that we would be doing consultation with those recommendations moving forward. We'll have an opportunity to come back out to your community and to this council to talk about recommendations, and then moving forward with potentially a new regulatory framework for beyond 2020, something like that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And thank you for coming out today, both to yourself and to Mr. McIntyre. Thank you. Okay, anything further from members of council? Councillor Loggins?
Thank you. It is disappointing to hear no acknowledgement that there was a lack of proper consultation in our community. I don't think that's the right way for research to occur and for policies to be implemented, especially in such a broad region. So I would like council to think about a motion to bring forward to the Parks Committee. I know Councillor Ray has some thoughts around how that might be framed, so perhaps that's something we can do in the very near future. It's very clear that we have to advocate more strongly because we're the only ones that are going to look out for ourselves on the CRD level.
Okay, so I'll just, if you would like to do that, then the next Regional Parks Committee meets next week, so the cutoff to do a notice with motion to that meeting has now closed. There won't be another, I think there will be one in September, and then that's it, and then it's to wrap up. So there is time, though, so what I'm saying is if members of council would like, I think it's time, you need to craft something and take some time. So I don't just want to wing it out right now. I think it would be the case where you could take it away, give some time into crafting something, and then put it forward at an upcoming meeting. We only have 5 more council meetings, including special council meetings in this term. So it's something that you would want to think of doing perhaps at the next meeting in July or the one in August at the very latest, in order for it to go through to hit the September timeline. But at least then it'll be on record and it would be there. And I think it's just important that we craft out some of the feedback and give solutions at the same time, rather than just, we don't agree with this. It's more hearing this and writing it out that way. So there's some time, just saying, but not a lot of time. Okay, good. Okay, so on that note, I would like to, adjourn the committee of the whole and go back into regular council. Do we need a vote for that? Oh, that council move out of committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, and we don't need a seconder. So all those in favor, opposed, motion's carried. And thank you to everyone who attended. We'll just take just a short 2-minute recess just so that everyone can exit and break and stretch. Okay, everyone, I'd like to get rolling. It's 8:45. Can you please take your seat so we can continue on with the agenda? We're still in the delegations section, and we have other materials to cover. So I'd like to welcome Zero Waste Sooke forward, please. We'll be receiving an update on Earth Day celebrations and so forth. So welcome, Mr. Bateman. And I'll leave it to you to introduce yourselves.
Yes, thank
and
you.
There you go.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and staff. I'm Jeff Bateman on behalf of Zero Waste Sooke tonight. I'm here with my colleague Wendy O'Connor, and we're here to present the final report on the Sooke Region Earth Day celebrations, which we feel duty-bound to do given the generous foundational funding from the district. And we're also here to revisit in our patient but persistent fashion the three asks that arose from our Talk Trash community open space meeting back in 2016. So first to Earth Day, two of our VIPs on our organizing team were Marlene Barry and Wendy here, who quarterbacked the Sooke Region community's cleanup. So I'll hand things over to Wendy to tell us about Earth Day and how that went.
So yes, extreme gratitude to the District of Sooke for the funding and for the Earth Day celebrations that we co-presented with Transition Sooke, Sooke Fall Fair Society, and Creatively United for the Planet. It was a true Made in Sooke, volunteer-organized and executed event, and we believe that we met our objectives to a fair degree and further established Sooke as a region that cares deeply about the environment. So for the two components to it, we had the cleanup, which we actually had 6 of the 9 Sooke Region communities participated. Skianu First Nation, East Sooke, District of Sooke, Otter Point, Shirley, and Pacheedaht. We had more than 103 people involved, volunteered cleaning up. 134 bags of garbage were collected, 25 bags of recycling, approximately 43 kilometers of Highway 14, 4.5 kilometers of beachfront, 31 kilometers of secondary and off-road were cleaned. And the second was our Planet Earth party. We had an estimated 1,000 people attend, 48 exhibitors set up tables. We gave away 250 LED light bulbs, 50 reusable carry bags, and 50 reusable produce bags. Approximately 30 repairs were completed by the 8 fixers at the Repair Cafe. Extensive media coverage, including Victoria Times Colonist, 424 hits on the blog spot, and a great thank you to Marlene Barry, who did an amazing job of coordinating that whole event, and all of the other people working underneath her.
2 minutes. We're down to 2 minutes.
Okay. On.
It's okay. That's good. Let's roll. They may give us a couple more minutes, possibly.
So one thing that we feel is very important was our community's legacy fund that we were able to put money aside for. So we are providing a bear-proof garbage can to East Sooke Community Hall, a pair of rainwater collection barrels to Ayr Manor, recycling bins at the concession stand at Fred Milne Park, recycling bins upstairs and downstairs to the community hall, as well as to the concession stand at Art Morris Park. Right. Over to you.
Wendy, thank you. So that legacy fund, there will probably be another $1,500 remaining from that we can, public spaces in Sooke that step forward may be eligible for that funding. So we at Zero Waste Sooke have slowly come to realize that in addition to public education and grassroots organization, that one of our big picture goals is to encourage the district to develop more of a comprehensive waste and recycling management plan. So in addition to the 3 asks that I'll address shortly, a situation like recycling services for Sooke businesses, a compost facility, a yard waste depot, Bearwise garbage bylaw, anti-dumping counteroffenses such as has been undertaken so effectively in the JDF, and also large item quarterly curbside pickup of things like mattresses, furniture, appliances. These are all possibilities if the district was to look at a comprehensive waste management plan in addition to existing practices. So we're down to 10 seconds, so I'm hoping you'll give me another couple of minutes to wrap up here.
Okay, so can I have a motion just to extend the time by, say... Okay, moved by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Casper.
Okay, I think you're all, thank you. So you're all familiar with these asks, because this is their third time here to discuss them. Single-use plastic reduction is number one. And since our last time here a year ago, Council told us at that time it would be closely following the progress of Surfrider Vancouver Island's call for a bag ban on the South Island. So since then, the CRD has issued a draft model bylaw in September of last year. This can be applied in any of the CRD's municipalities. And of course, the City of Victoria has gone ahead with its long-awaited bylaw on July 1st. And that followed an unsuccessful court challenge by the Canadian Plastic Bag Association. The BC Supreme Court judgment last month read municipalities have the authority to regulate waste through business bylaws. Ipso facto, green light for the bylaw in Victoria. Key point was that fees collected will remain with the businesses. It is not a municipal tax or fee. So ideally, from our perspective tonight, Council will make a motion directing staff to study the CRD and Victoria bylaws and craft a bylaw for Sooke. And rather than just bags, single-use plastic bags, wouldn't it be great if the Sooke bylaw also covered a wide range of single-use plastics, bags, straws, and plastic bottles included? So as you'll see, if you've checked the City of Victoria bylaw website, you'll note that they have a whole rollout of materials for retailers and customers, tip sheets, handbills, posters, decals, templates of all kinds. So we in Sooke can follow this model pretty closely and implement it quite easily, I believe. And as you see, the Bring Your Own Bag sign was introduced last fall by Zero Waste Sooke, and that was part of our contribution to the educational effort, and we now need the district to follow up. Our second ask, we're drinking water fountains, so thank you, Sooke Council, for okaying a 3-tier water fountain at John Phillips Memorial Park as part of the new washrooms, and potentially one as well at Whiff and Spit, if indeed you go ahead with a washroom there. And as you see, there are some other likely spots, particularly the town core. And our final ask is the Resource Recovery Center, which is the big picture ask. That wraps back to this district waste management plan, and hopefully that would be a key component of whatever you explore. So finally, I guess that's it from me. Wendy, do you want to close out?
I just want to make a plea as a mother and as a grandmother. I love the Indigenous values in the 7th generation principle. And on behalf of our planet and the animal species that are being, there's not a day that goes by now that we don't hear about how the state of our oceans and whales that are, being found dead, full of plastic. And not even that far away, a couple of weeks ago, there was an image of a photographer on Shuswap Lake got a picture of a grebe carrying plastic to its chick. It's a simple thing that we can do. It's not that hard, Carry it in. You can even take it further and put your produce and your veggies and fruit in there. The one big thing that people say is, what am I going to put my garbage in? Really? If you are following the CRD ban on the organics and you're recycling, you don't have any wet garbage. You could take all of that Sooke News Mirror advertising stuff and fold it and use that to put your garbage in. Or you could take something like this and use it and then dump it straight into your garbage. So, we said we couldn't come up with, when they added the 250 onto our, I can't do that. I cannot remember to add that to my 642 number. It's a habit. We can do it. So I implore you to think about our environment.
Thank you very much for the presentation and for all the work you did on those events. They were very successful. I have a question for you. Maybe you can give me some advice here. So I would agree that when you recycle and you separate your organics and the like, that the garbage, what is left, is quite minimal, and often it is just plastic. Until you introduce child and dog to the factor, and then it changes and it smells. And when you have a dog that is toilet training in your house and eating everything, then the garbage it's just dramatically changed in our house, and it's gone from minimal to quite significantly more. And yes, there's cloth and diapers and all those things, and that's all great for a while, and then you consider the amount of water and detergents and the like that you're using, and sizes and leaks, and then you just give up and you donate it all to someone else that has more time and energy, and then you just add other things that come from dogs that are learning to train properly, and children that are also learning to train and having mistakes along the way. So there's not much. I mean, some would say, oh, you can get a digester for that, you can do this, you can do that. Well, when you live in a subdivision, or as we approve small lots, those aren't necessarily outdoor options available to all. So in that case, that's where I tend to sometimes ask for plastic bags, because I actually need them in my house. Otherwise, I have to buy plastic bags. So is that sort of the answer, that if we rule out plastic bags and you buy plastic bags for what you need them for?
I don't think they're ever going to be gone completely.
Yeah.
You can take your bread bag. There's plenty of other places. Or you could probably even go to Village Foods and people that have been returning them, that you could take some of those bags.
But if they're all banned, they don't exist. And if you go to the market, you don't have a bag for your bread.
Yeah. Well, actually,
just saying, going through my own life here.
Mayor Tate, in the CRD, I don't have a dog, nor have I ever had a child, so I sympathize with your situation. However, there are exemptions to the CRD and City of Victoria bylaws, one of which, I've got the CRD here, is where an exemption is where plastic bags are sold in packages containing multiple bags intended for such uses, including but not limited to garbage bags, pet waste bags, yard waste bags, or recycling bags. So you will still be able. So what we're seeking here is a retail bylaw that would require retailers to not use single-use plastic and instead offer paper bags at 15 cents perhaps. Paper, of course, goes more readily into the recycling stream. Plastic tends to get into the garbage bags. People don't seem to realize that Pacific Mobile Depot here, right on Maryland Road, they can take a huge garbage bag packed full of plastic for like $3-4. So I think what we're seeking here is, there is an international trend right now, recognition of plastic is a problem. So what are we in the District of Sooke going to do about that?
No, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay,
but it's a good point.
Just a little context sometimes. Okay.
Poop.
Yeah. Councillor Parkinson, and then to Pearson, please.
Through you, Your Worship. I totally agree with you on the ban for the single-use plastic bags. Living in Germany for 14 years, there were never any plastic bags ever. And people there have dogs and kids and everything, and there are no plastic bags to be given out. People would take their groceries and actually not even put them in a box. They just put them in the trunk of their cars, right? That's what they do with them. I think that with the CRD, with Victoria putting it in place, all the stores that do have plastic bags are able to use them. So they're not banned until they're gone. They're not telling them to get rid of them all, from my understanding. So once they're gone, right? Is that your understanding?
Wendy?
No, it actually states no plastic bags are to be given out after the 1st of July.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, they've already gone through that.
So, and I just had a couple other questions for you, besides the garbage bags. I was wondering about the bear-proof garbage can. Where were you getting that from? They have to be, is it CSA approved or some kind of
Well,
approval
actually,
on
we
them?
put the East Sooke Community Hall in touch with Wildwise Sooke.
Okay.
And they've been, and I think Home Hardware carries one particular bin that has proven to withstand the hardiest of claws.
Correct.
I don't know.
Okay,
The
thanks. I was
hungriest of
just
bears.
wondering
Yeah.
where they were from.
But good question. Yeah.
And then my other question was, you had talked in your report about the water station. And is the CRD that has the water station that they rent out for different events?
Yeah.
I have not seen that, but I think having a water station in Sooke for all our major events, which are a fair number, would be something that we could look into as well. I think that would be a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank
yeah,
you.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearson. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you again for your presentation. Thank you for the Zero Waste Days and Earth Day. I think they were really cool events. I was particularly interested in the Fix-It shop down underneath. I like to fix things myself, and I'm not near as good as those guys, but I think that's something that we really need to pay attention to, is that, you know, I work on Glanford Avenue, and there's a recycling depot owned by the provincial government down there, and you would see a mountain of televisions and coffee pots or whatever it is that people throw away. So anyways, that's a really cool idea that I really like. Tonight, Saanich is voting on the plastic bag. It's going to their council tonight. So Victoria's already passed it. So I think that it's time for other municipalities to jump on the bandwagon with the single-use plastic bags. So I would make a motion to direct staff to prepare a bylaw to discontinue use of single-use plastic bags in soup. So.
Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Pearson and seconded by Councillor Loggins. Can you repeat it, Councillor Pearson? That Council directs staff
To prepare a proposed bylaw banning the use of single-use plastic bags.
Okay, and
Simple.
would you like to speak to the motion now that
Yes.
it's been seconded? Go ahead.
I just think that it's incumbent upon us to take steps that, you know, along with our neighbors and for the bigger picture, for the planet. I think that, you know, we're seeing Seattle's already banned plastic straws, plastic utensils, all those things, and we're all sharing the same ocean. It's not very far across here to our friends in the U.S. So it's a movement, and I think that we should be part of it. I think it's cool. And I thank you guys for being proactive and always keeping it alive.
Fort McMurray actually banned single-use plastic bags in 2010, 8 years ago, and
Thank
no problems.
You. We have a motion now, so the discussion is just with council. That's okay. Thank you. Going to the seconder, Councillor Loggins.
Since the motion is regarding a report drafted by staff, I'm hoping that you would be open to a friendly amendment to include "and other single-use plastics."
Certainly,
so that could investigate as you were mentioning, the forks and the straws and everything, just for the report.
Okay, are you comfortable with that as okay, so then we need to have that moved as an amendment, and that would be, if you could repeat that, Councillor Loggins, and that the amendment is that, and other single-use items, is that your amendment?
It's too many.
And other single-use items. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Yeah. Is there a seconder for that amendment? I'll second the amendment. And that's to add the other bits on the amendment now. So that's adding in other items. Councillor Pearson.
And no offense to my fellow councillor Loggins, I'm not disagreeing in principle, but I think that it's complicating the issue. There's already a draft bylaw by the CRD about single-use plastic bags. So I want to build on what the other municipalities have and that bag. I'm not opposed after this motion to it, but I won't support that adding this into my motion. Thank you.
Councillor Loggins?
Then perhaps we can do it as a separate motion that's drafted by staff, but we're not. The issue, Councillor Pearson, is plastics. The issue is not which plastics we're discussing to ban.
Councillor Ray, on the amendment?
So just for clarification, when we're talking about single-use plastic items, would we be looking at local businesses wouldn't be able to bring in bottled water? Like, I just need some clarification as to how we define single-use plastic items.
Councillor Loggins?
And that's why it would be going back to staff for a draft based on other municipalities who are doing those things already. So it wouldn't be us inventing the wheel, it would be us creating something based on what has been done and succeeding in other communities.
That would be defined in the bylaw. We'd probably have an area of definitions where it would say things like straw or utensils or whatever.
So just as a point of order, okay. So I think what I've heard is Councillor Pearson is wanting us to just talk about single-use plastic bags, and Councillor Logans has offered to do a separate motion.
She's made an amendment that's been seconded already, so that's why I'm speaking. Okay. That's why we're talking on the amendment. And should it fail, then the opportunity to put in a second one could come up. Okay. But it's already, the amendment has already carried, is up for discussion right now. Okay? Councillor Casper, did you have a comment?
No, I just want to speak to the main motion.
Okay, so we'll just leave it at the amendment. Anything further on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Councillor Pearson, Parkinson, Ray, and Casper are opposed, so the amendment fails. So we're back to just the straight motion that was put forward, that council direct staff to draft a bylaw banning the use of single-use plastic bags in Sooke. Motion, Councillor Casper.
Yes. It's my hope that that when the bylaw is drafted and the staff report comes forward, that there is a mechanism to actually have some form of consultation with business community, i.e. those who are selling food. I know that just from a health side, most of the businesses that sell raw meat, be it chicken or beef or any pork, etc., or fish, insert the packages in clear plastic so that there is no contamination with other food sources. That's what most do. And sometimes they ask, sometimes they don't ask. But the odd time somebody could go to a checkout with a leaky thing of meat, and that could cause some problems with the other foods that may be contained. So I would just hope that there is a process, that there is some consultation. It's my understanding that Victoria did go through such a process where they sought input from the business community on whether they're in favor or not. I don't even know what those results were. I'm not opposed to the proposal, but I think we have to be inclusive because this will fail. The process will fail if we don't get a buy-in from all the participants, and I think that's critical. So, and I just would hope that we do that. Thank you.
No, that seems more than reasonable. I mean, a lot of businesses are already taking on this initiative on their own locally already. Okay, so Councillor Loggins, then Pearson, then Ray. Or sorry, I'll go to Councillor Ray. Okay, Loggins, Pearson, Ray.
Just really quickly, I know that Zero Waste Sooke has done that research consulting with the businesses who are in favor of this, and that's when it was brought forward, I believe, the first time to discuss that they were already on board. I do agree that we can still bring that consultation. We can always talk about it more, so that's good, but as far as I know, and perhaps after the discussion they can touch on that, but the consultation with businesses is positive.
Okay, Councillor Pearson. Okay, Councillor Ray.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. My comment is I really support the idea of people cutting down on the use of plastic bags, and I want to come back to what Councillor Casper made about the businesses, because at one time the Superstore in Langford didn't use plastic bags. You had to use your own. But they've gone back to using plastic bags. And one of the comments I heard was because staff were not wanting to use and to pack I heard that here at one of the local stores, didn't want to pack because of the filthiness of some of the bags that were coming in, the cloth bags that were not being washed. That, I'm only coming back to the comment where you get leaky meats into cloth bags, and it does create problems for people, and that's why I think we need the consultation. I'm not saying I don't support this, but I think that those are some of the things that we may not think about when you're coming up with a bylaw to ban something. So,
but that can be part of the bylaw, though. Like if it's food safety and sanitation and the like, and keeping your food supply safe, I think there's ways of crafting that in the bylaw. That if things are leaking everywhere, and it does happen, that you need something to absorb that. So I think that's a little bit different. Councillor Loggins, and then I'll call the question on this.
Yeah, just quickly, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not the first community to do this. We don't need to focus on how this can't work, but instead change your thinking about how it can, and trust that the staff will investigate other bylaws when creating ours.
Okay, so I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Okay, that's one. We'll get the bylaw back, and you're more than welcome to comment it when it comes forward. And in terms of your other asks, the water fountains, we have them there, and then of course going forward, we'll see how that model works, and it can go forward to the next council in their budget, as well as your other initiative. I think just timing-wise, to set something up with staff and what we have remaining, I think it's excellent feedback to carry forward. So thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Okay, so this leads us, we're into our public question and comment period. We've gone through all our delegations. So this item here is for any items on tonight's agenda. If you could please give us your name and address and the item you wish to speak with, and there's 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Derek Lures, 5526 Sooke Road. It's now been 4 weeks since I sat here the first time to request action on 5536 Sooke Road. 28 weeks since I sent an official complaint listing no more than 16 bylaw violations, and I'm looking to see if council has an update for me today.
Okay, it's not on tonight's agenda, but I understand there has been an application received that will come forward to council at an upcoming meeting.
An application for?
I don't know any more than that.
Okay.
But there's movement, so.
Okay.
And
Thank you
that's
very much.
all I can say about it. Thank you, Mr. Lures. Other items on tonight's agenda, please. Or pardon me, other comments on tonight's agenda, please.
Hi, Britt Santowski from 2206 Church Road, and this is about the bylaw for the recycling and the garbage being put out on the evening of. And for me, the recycling gets picked up at 7 a.m. in the morning, and recycling is supposed to be washed, so it is supposed to be not an attractant to begin with, because otherwise you're contaminating the recycling as well. So when you're considering that motion, just to consider the recycling timeline as a separate thing from garbage, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that'll be on the notice of motion that's coming forward later. Other items on tonight's agenda? Any other comments or questions from anyone? Okay. So we'll move on into the rest of the agenda, and we are item 10.1. We have a zoning amendment bylaw for for Water Street, and I'll turn that over to staff, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is no civic address, so you were not wrong in being confused. So the applicant would like to amend the rural residential or RU4 zone to allow a boathouse on the subject property as an accessory building without a principal building. And again, there is no civic address, so I'm just going to say the subject property throughout this presentation. A zoning amendment is required for this because in the zoning bylaw, accessory buildings are defined as being located on the same lot as a principal building, the use or intended use, which is customarily ancillary, subordinate, and associated with the use of the principal building or the use of the lot. Without a principal building on this lot, we need to amend the zone to put an accessory building. This is the subject property in a larger context. It's located on Water Street. So if you were heading westbound on Highway 14 and took a left on Charters Road, once you made it around the curve, it turns into Water Street, which as you head down towards the end where the subject property is, the grade change between the street and the shoreline becomes pretty significant. This is the site zoomed in. You can see the small access path down from Water Street and the applicant's dock. The applicant resides at 6526 Water Street, directly across from the subject property. So this is a photo looking at the property towards the easterly portion of Sooke Harbor. The subject property is a foreshore water lot, meaning that there is a strip of land, then the foreshore, which is the part of the shore between the high and low water marks, and water covering the rest of the lot. The applicant is proposing to build a 31 meter squared, which is approximately 338 square foot boathouse with a living roof and cantilevered dock with davits extending over the foreshore to facilitate launching small pleasure craft on the shoreline. The first photo here shows the subject property from the shore looking upslope to Water Street. You can note the change in grade. The second photo shows a concept of the boathouse on the subject property looking easterly again. So the subject property does not require site servicing of any kind. The environmental report, building design, and construction plan are all satisfactory to staff. The applicant will be required to apply for a floodplain exemption and development variance permit if this application is successful. Staff supports this and finds the boathouse to be an appropriate level of development for the subject property. In addition, the referral agencies had no concerns with the boathouse. And lastly, here are a couple more photos of the proposed boathouse looking upslope and then looking downslope towards the water. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Everts. It seems fairly straightforward. Questions from members of council? Councillor Pearson.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Can you go back to second slide in, please? Somewhere in there. One, two, no, one more. No, one more. Sorry. One minute. There, that one. It seems unusual that all these tent lots are all the same size, except for that there's 1 and 2. So how come?
So point of clarity, 1 and 2 here are RU4, rural residential lots. The rest are all the CD14, the tent lots.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why when this was surveyed, it's pre-1900, it's a very old survey, why those 2 are larger than the rest.
Okay. So in fact, the property line is actually way out in the water for all of these?
That is correct.
Okay. So, and that property, the 6526, it's separated by water. So is it a separate lot?
Yes, it's a separate lot with a separate legal address, which is why we need to amend the zone for RU4. And why it doesn't need servicing, because it's a lot associated with across the street, which is where the applicant resides.
Okay. Okay, I might have some more questions in a minute. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments from anyone on council? There's a recommendation here that council give first and second reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 710 to amend the rural residential RU4 zone on lot 1, section 14. Sooke District Plan VIP 20069 to allow boathouses and accessory building without a principal use. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Ray. Further comments or questions about this? Councillor Pearson? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. And the second part then is that a public hearing be scheduled for zoning amendment bylaw number 710, 600-59-2018 in accordance with section 466 of the Local Government Act. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Ray. Councillor Pearson, if you do have other comments or questions, obviously there's an opportunity when this comes forward. Yeah. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously as well. Thank you very much. Reports requiring action. Our next one is 11.1, Demomuel Creek pedestrian crossing, and this is post open house. Welcome, Ms. Hooper.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, Council. I will introduce Steve Melton, who's the consultant on the project, who will be able to answer any questions should you have them after my presentation. So we're at the stage 2 of a project where we're doing some investigations to site a potential crossing of Demomuel Creek for pedestrians. The proposal is to connect the Sun River Phillips Road neighborhood trail system to that of the downtown core. This report summarizes conceptual designs that were developed for stakeholder and public consultation in May and the resultant feedback. Ooh, too fast. This is the study area in the orange square, so that it indicates the Sun River and the Phillips Road trail system. And if you look very closely, you can see the huge amount of trails and sidewalks that are in both the town center and in the Phillips Road and Sun River neighborhood. And then you can see a large area that is not connecting in the north-south to each of those areas, and that's because of the barrier of Demomuel Creek. There is one current crossing of Demomuel Creek, which is on Phillips Road through the, and there is pedestrian walkways along Phillips Road on the Demomuel Creek Bridge. So the past council actions were to have us study that area and come up with some conceptual designs to take to public open house and stakeholder consultation. The yellow line that you see in this grid is that of a more gentle slope on an existing logging road that we found when we were traipsing through the bush over several different excursions. The red line that you see is a proposed alignment that would be much more steep. The black line is the area of the bridge that you see over the blue water course, and the black solid line would be elevated boardwalk through a floodplain. The north side of the creek, the dotted line that you see in this graph, is an existing, well-established 3-meter wide trail that exists from Sun River Way to Demomuel Creek. So you can walk straight up to the creek right now and dead end at that site. So in May, or the end of May, I guess it was, or mid-May, we did a public consultation for stakeholder consultation first in this chamber, where we had visitors from the Journey Middle School and Poirier Elementary. We had Sooke District 62 in residence and representatives of the Wonderfuka Trail Society. Then we went to Sea Park and did some public consultation there, which was well received by about over 100 people. We also went on another day to Journey Middle School and talked to the leadership class and had about 25 students listen to us and engage. Generally speaking, the graph says it all. People want a gentle slope. That's the large graph that you see there. They want it to be wide, so not quite, but maybe comparable to the Galloping Goose standard. They would like a gravel surface in comparison to a natural surface that you'd see of wood shavings, etc., and that's so that you can have year-round usability. And they want a natural-looking bridge. Now, that was very clear that people wanted it to fit with the environment, but they also wanted it to last. So that was a message that was loud and clear. And they also thought protecting the environment was very important. We heard a lot of information about people wanting to make sure that we were up out of that floodplain and that we didn't have leakage, so to speak, of users going into the sensitive riparian areas around the trail. We also heard interesting things about having the opportunity for outdoor classrooms and widened areas where we could have interpretive signage and really get the children safely into these areas for educational purposes. When talking to the stakeholders and to the members of the public, safety was a key concern. Ownership of the trails was something that we were talking to School District 62 about. Maintenance, who's going to look after it and who's going to be responsible for liability and insurance. Those are things that we can accomplish solutions through statutory right-of-ways. The School District 62 was very clear that we need to make safety of students a key priority, which is something that we will, of course, consider when going through to the 50% design drawing. Screening of the trail from play areas like Poirier Elementary was also considered very important so that general users would be, the students could have their privacy for play and feel safe. An outdoor classroom was also considered very important. And very important as well was the interaction at the road-trail interface. How do you slow down the cyclists to reduce conflicts in vehicles? So given all of that information, we are now asking that Council allow us to proceed with the 50% design drawing, which is included in the existing contract that we have with ISL and in the existing financial plan, and give us direction to return to Council with design and preliminary cost estimates at the end of the project. This means that we will get out into the site and start doing surveys, get some really good information, which we don't have at the moment, do some preliminary environmental assessments to make sure there aren't any major barriers like species at risk, et cetera, in these areas. We acknowledge that it is a sensitive space, so how to proceed with caution and respecting the environmental values. So with that concludes my portion of the presentation, and the resolution is in front of you.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Hooper, and also to our consultant on this work. I think just given what we heard earlier in terms of plans to possibly have a school constructed in Sun River, there's an excellent opportunity to connect the neighborhoods. We've had a number of school trips, school classes visit us here in the Municipal Hall over the year, and even the teachers had expressed interest in this because of the outdoor education component, and often the students go down to Demont Creek, so this would be a safe outdoor learning opportunity there as well. When I wandered there, I went on the trailhead that's a little bit more up Sun River Way, and I thought, wow, like there's some real steep topography in here, and it was quite narrow in some parts, and then I thought, wow, this is really taking us out of the way, but I figured you follow it and you still end up at the creek, and it's beautiful in there. And then I was concerned a bit about the crossing, but then realized I'm on the wrong trail, and there's a crosswalk, and it's gravel, and it's completely different. So different areas, but a very unique and beautiful environment there nonetheless. And then you can see just the ease of crossing that way, just to connect the neighborhoods. I also thought perhaps in the event of emergency where, groups of residents have to move from one area to the other, whether it's coming from in town to higher ground because of whether it's earthquake or tsunami or whatever, there is just an opportunity to move people safely through our community and to connect it. So I'm quite excited about this and think it's a really good move. It would be interesting just to see over time if there's some way of trail branching off of this back to Sea Park somehow. I don't know if it's possible. It's just Phillips Road itself is so narrow, and it's not cycling. You have to ride on the sidewalk, which isn't good for pedestrians. It's just because the road itself is narrow and challenging. But anyway, it's a great mode. I know it's been identified in our Parks and Trails plan and in others, so hopefully Council can give support to see this next phase go forward. But we'll see what they say. Councillor Loggins.
Thanks. I just wanted to move the recommendation. This is one of the most exciting things, I think, has come to the table so far. And so thank you for bringing that forward, and thank you for your work in that. Hopefully that passes.
Okay. Is there a seconder that's been moved? Seconded by Councillor Ray. So go to Councillor Ray, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I live up against that area, and so I've been very keen to, and I thank Ms. Hooper for the work that she did there that evening when I was in attendance. I think the one thing that I do, and I triggered when Ms. Hooper spoke about the safety of kids, that is real bear habitat behind there. And I'm just wondering, in terms of engineering something, that if there's a way that, whether it's something, I don't want there to be vandalism and that sort of thing, but I think if we're going to put kids through that area, there's bears there all the time, that we have some mechanism that if there is a bear, that there's some sort of system, a bell or something that can be, like on a bike, something, because it's dark down there, and it's not easy to get there. The homes that abut up against that trail, they're 30 feet straight down. So it's not like somebody can hear a child in that needs help that can get over the fence. I can't do that. I have to go all the way around. So I'm mindful of that piece. I certainly support it. I like the idea. Yes, it's right next to my property. I'm not worried about it, but I am worried about the bears and the children. Yeah. Thank you.
It would be interesting. When I was in Japan, there's not bear problem, but there's wild boars there that are very dangerous, and there's different things you can hit that make a clattering noise that are natural, and they're just there. And so that when you're there, because I'm like, what are we banging along the way? And then realized it was actually to send the boars off because they're quite dangerous. So it's something, but it was unique. It was an interesting component that made the whole experience. And of course, there was signage, but I couldn't read it at the time until someone told me what it was. Councillor Pearson.
Yeah. Through you to the presentation. Thank you. I have 3 questions. Where in the budget is this coming from? Like, if we approve this tonight, where's the allocation coming from through to the CAO?
Currently, it's in the budget. There's $55,000 allocated under the DeManuel Creek pedestrian crossing. So this is included in the existing budget, so there's no additional expenditures. So our contract currently exists with ISL.
So we expect that the design, the 50% design will be within that 55,000?
Correct.
Okay. Question number 1. Sensitive areas, Sooke First Nations, have they been part of your consultation process? Are they aware? Are they agreeing with this?
Through your worship, yes, we have sent them both via email and via the post a package of the public consultation and invited them for feedback. However, we've not heard a response from them.
Yeah. I know that when I was talking to Chief Plains, he was talking about that area specifically being very sensitive, something that they were looking at. So I'd be interested to make sure that that's also included. And my third and final question is, will it be a dog-leash park or...
Through your worship, with
you can
respect.
Scratch that question.
All of our parks are under effective control. I know, but I had to give you a cheeky answer because it was a cheeky question. Anything else from members of council at this time? It's been moved and seconded then, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously, and we look forward to the next part. I just have one last follow-up. Actually, sorry, I should have asked this further. When there was the 2 options, like the gentle sloping and the more direct, is there some way to look at doing both of those? Or is it one or the other? Because it's like one kind of it's gentle and sloping, but it takes you up and out of the way, and the other one seems more direct. But I guess it's the steepness that would be a deterrent, but I don't know. Can you do both, or do we have to pick one?
The existing budget allows for one design to move forward with.
Okay.
So we would, as per the recommendation, design the gentle slope.
So that's the yellow one.
The yellow
then.
line,
Okay.
yeah.
That's fine. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Excellent. Okay, we look forward to hearing more about that. So, next item up, 11.2, Development Services Vehicle. And we have a report here, and who is speaking to, oh, Ms. Hooper, welcome back.
Thank you, Your Worship. The resolution in front of you is to purchase a development services vehicle that would be supplying or servicing both the planning department and engineering department. Currently, we're serviced by a 2-seater pickup truck, and that's sometimes not conducive for traveling with groups to meetings, etc. The resolution would be in addition to fleet. We would not be getting rid of that pickup truck, but would further accommodate the growing staff that's downstairs.
Okay, and I understand this has already been budgeted for and talked about, so it's here just so we have that. Questions from members of council? Councillor Pearson?
If I remember correctly, we budgeted $50,000? How much was it? I can't remember. I don't remember what that budget was.
Through your worship, I believe it was a $35,000 allocation, so this $33,000 expenditure is within budget. The second bid that we had was over budget, so that's one of the reasons why we did select the hybrid vehicle.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Would someone like to move the motion? Moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Hooper. Next is 11.3, utility vehicle procurement. So, welcome, Chief Mount. This is another item that we went through the budget for, so it's here. I'll let you speak to it, please.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. This report is to authorize request to complete an RFP for the purchase of a new critical fire department utility vehicle. It is part of a 5-year plan that's been in place for the last couple of years. A critical need has been identified to replace the current existing Squad 1 unit with a new type of unit that can better serve our needs. Safety issues and performance requirements of the current Squad unit have been identified to no longer be useful for the fire department. The Squad 1 unit would be removed out of service and no longer utilized. We expect maintenance costs over the next 5 years to be reduced, and part of our reasonable growth with our plan with the fleet, our asset management software has also identified our Squad unit in very poor condition. An investment in this unit would provide an expected 15 years of performance in our fleet. The Squad 1 unit has shown considerable reliability concerns over the last couple of years. It no longer can tow due to some refurbishment that was done in an accident. The trailer receiver hitch is not accessible for some of our towing needs. We've had considerable downtime due to some parasitic battery loss, and we had a couple instances where it did not start during an emergency. It's approaching its 15th year of service, and we're looking to replace it a year early, and we expect to recover about $6,000 in recovery costs if we dispose of it. If Council chooses to look at maintaining the status quo, we can still expect to see increased downtime, poor response times from Station 2, increased equipment and maintenance costs, also exposure to risk of not being able to roll the volunteer firefighters out of Station 2 when the unit's down. The only benefit would be the capital reserve, so it would not be impacted. So in summary, we're recommending that Council invests in a new utility unit. It'll better serve the needs of the community with a broader role than several of our light-duty vehicles. I'd like to close that we authorized expenditure of $75,000 that's already in the 5-year plan budget, and to look forward to posting an RFP in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much, Chief. Anything further from members of Council? Councillor Loggins, then Casper.
I'd like to move the recommendation.
Recommendation moved by Councillor Loggins and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Speaking to it, Councillor Casper.
Yeah, just through you to the Chief. How do we plan on disposing of the existing vehicles? Is that going to be through provincial government asset disposal?
Through your worship to Councillor Casper, would be through a typical bidding process. We'd likely put it up on BC Bid and have the bidding process outline the requirements to bid and within a certain time frame.
Councillor Pearson.
We used 2 or 3 times ago. We used a provincial auction site, and it worked really well for. I think we ended up getting more money through that through to CAO. I can't remember what it's called. BC Auction, I think.
Thank you, through your worship. The last vehicle we actually had advertised just on our website. We looked into the online. The fees associated were a little steep, I think, for what we were needing to do. We do have a purchasing policy that lists out what we're supposed to do with surplus assets, so we do have to follow that, and there may be a requirement to offer it to other municipalities first. So we'll just confirm everything. Yep. The chief's ready to speak to it, I guess.
Your worship to Councillor Pearson. We do have a disposal of surplus assets policy, and item 24.1 outlines 6 steps on disposing of the actual asset properly.
Great. Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. That was just going to be my comment, that as long as it's within the asset disposal policy, that it'll be theirs.
Okay. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Chief. 11.4, permissive tax exemption. We have the report, but Mr. Blackhall, would you like to add any more to this? This sort of hasn't come up before.
Thanks, Your Worship. This one, something happened in the drafting of the bylaw where the full legal description didn't get included, so it looks like we're only asking to exempt one portion of the 3 property IDs that are associated with this one tax folio. So it just got confused, and BC Assessment Authority ended up including it in the roll, and we ended up issuing a notice. So we're looking for council to consider not having us collect the municipal portion. We're unfortunately going to have to remit the third-party amounts, because that isn't something that council can waive. So that's the report.
Councillor Ray?
I was just going to move the recommendation as a whole.
Do the 2 together,
Yes,
Councillor
please.
Ray? Okay, that's been moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Casper. Anything further? Councillor Casper?
Yeah, just a question. I have had discussion with the CAO, and I know that there's another situation with the Knox Church or Knox Vision.
That's in the correspondence that's coming up.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. 12.1. We received quite an in-depth report from the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue, and Council at the time asked just for some feedback from our fire chief in terms of how our emergency crews work together on this. So you'll see this here. And just any further comment to your report, Chief Mount?
Thank you, Your Worship. My basic comment is that it's generally a very good positive move. We met with RCM SAR representatives and also recently had a tour of their headquarters facility in East Sooke. We very much, as fire department and the emergency program, look forward to working with them more closely. And if anything, we expect to be able to request their resources in a more efficient manner and have safer operations when we're working around standing water.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I met with Mr. Pat Quealy some time ago and then bumped into him recently at CFB Esquimalt, and he had offered to tour any of us of the facilities, and I know both Councillor Parkinson and Loggins had taken up that invite. So it's something that we'll continue to look at coordinating, and if any other member of council would like to join us, just let me know so we can tee that up together. Okay? So here it's just to, unless anything further for the Chief, a motion to receive the report. Moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Ray. Thank you very much for that. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay. New business item. We had put forward a motion as to various ministers that we would like to seek an audience with at the upcoming UBCM. And there has been further interest from members of council on a few others. However, we are limited to submitting only 3 requests. So just given sort of some things that are arising, I would suggest that we work on the Solicitor General, Minister of Finance, Minister of Municipal Affairs, and submit those, and then we'll see if we are successful in those meeting requests. They are also limiting to just 3 members of council and staff, but I've put all of us attending on the list to attend these meetings. I will have duties at UBCM, and that may conflict with when these meetings occur. We also have a resolution going forward to the Assembly, so we have to strategize and sort of divide and conquer, because someone will need to be in the audience to speak to the resolution if it's in a block or even extracted out for debate. There's the minister meetings, and then, of course, whatever duties I have assigned to me, which I won't know until closer to convention. So it's just something that I recommend we plan for. We've had some feedback on what councillors would like to raise with these items, and staff are working with me to help provide this briefing, but it's still a little bit vague. So just in terms of the Minister of Municipal Affairs, would anyone like just to elaborate a bit further on what you would like to talk about? Because we do need to give them a heads up in the briefing as to why we're seeking the meeting.
You're looking at me.
Well, I'm looking at all of you, but you're in my field of vision. Brenda's Parkinson cannot attend, so.
My purpose for meeting with them is to talk about the pre-zoning and affordable housing. Is there a way that the provincial government can overlay existing zoning with a pre-zone so that developers could look at potential locations in our town center, as an example, I'm just saying in our town center, where the existing homeowners can maintain their current tax rates, yet in the background there's pre-zoning. So I just wanted to ask her what her thoughts on it, because if you read the document that they produced, that's what it looks like they're doing, but it's somewhat ambiguous the way that reads.
So maybe we can just look that we're trying to gain clarity on how we can take that and implement it within our community and just see.
Yeah. And build rental stock as an example, and that ties into the affordable housing piece of it.
Okay. There will also be, because we're only limited to, say, 15 or 20 minutes of time, there will be a session on building affordability that might also help answer some of that as well, but this will also be another opportunity. And I know that I think Councillor Casper had raised also discussing support for the Lot A Seniors Housing Project. And would it be like an advocate just for some funding support? Is that the intent?
Yeah, just advocating and hoping that, you know, the two intakes for submissions, October and November, you know, isn't going to be so constricted to stop, because it is a very short time frame. You know, but the window is like very short between now and then, and that's all I was hoping, is that to convey and to hopefully, if there is a sound proposal, and I know McCole Housing has met with our CAO, and there have been some discussions that hopefully will be fruitful, but I would like us to help give some support or lend support if need be. And it's better to go there, I think, with that request.
Yes. What we can do then is perhaps also include, like we have done some motions that have support this, so if we can maybe, if staff, if you could pull out the resolutions that pertain to that, and maybe we could add that into our briefing, it'll just sort of show that we're not just, this has been some momentum now towards this, and that's where we're looking for that support there. The other one with the Minister of Finance, there was speculation tax. I'm still, myself and our CEO have been talking about the collection of social insurance numbers and how we can safe handle that. I think just giving our perspective on that, it was very important. And also it's come up that with the land lease, or with the arrangement in Sun River, where seniors or anyone in the River's Edge development acquires a home there but leases the land, that it doesn't qualify for, you can't do the deferment on that, but it's similar in some ways to a manufactured home where you're renting a pad but you own the home. So in some ways it's just to advocate that this is a new form of housing that's come into our community, and is there a way then that this can be, so that's just come up because the project itself is new. So I think it's something that we should bring to their attention. The other thing I would like to do is a follow-up, is just given our delegation on the school district, we're maxed out at the 3, but I would like to send a letter to the Minister of Education, just following up on the meeting that I had with them last year, and also now that we have this presentation, just that we would like to see support from the ministry on these items. And I've raised it with our Premier as well, but this will just sort of finalize that, and I can also arrange a meeting as I can. And that's it. That's our 3. Oh, and the Solicitor General was on the seniors driving testing, and I gleaned from the article some comments that you had made about a rural designation, I think, and I've kind of cut and pasted that out. Yeah, if you can,
If I could
please.
just add, I think it's important to convey to the minister that there's reference to correspondence that's in our package later on that Sooke is 38 or 30. Don't have the exact number. 38. I think it's 38 kilometers. I just don't have it here. Anyway, the driving distance is they seem it's appropriate, whereas in Sydney the driving distance is only 22.4 kilometers, and in Sydney they have a once a month testing, or a person goes out to Sydney to actually do the testing for their people who are 80 years plus.
Okay, that's a very important point to make.
And what I would hope that we could present is that perhaps they could look at implementing a pilot project for Sooke to see the feasibility of it working, and if Sooke isn't the option, well, perhaps the West Shore, because the West Shore has got a substantially large population base, and it would still be a lot closer than driving all the way to Mackenzie and Quadra Street. I apologize for not. 38 kilometers. So I was correct.
Nope, that's great.
So anyway, that's kind of some additional information.
That would be good. We're going to finish this up tomorrow, so we can set it in before the deadline.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. It's not really the distance that ever bothers me. It's the time that it actually takes to drive.
Yeah, it's the time, and it's the curvature, and it's.
Well, I just to say 50 minutes, that's fine if there's no traffic. The roads and the traffic and getting through the Mackenzie interchange, you're betting on an hour and a half. So why maybe 38 kilometers, it certainly isn't 50 minutes, unless you're right dead in the middle of the day when it's a Sunday.
No, they're not open. No. Okay. Thank you very much, councillors. So we'll work on that, and then when we have some feedback, then I'll share those highlights with you. And for those of you that are attending, you need to fill out your forms and submit them to staff, please, so that they're not chasing you. Okay. Correspondence. So we have correspondence from Sea Park here. This was raised at a recent commission meeting where we have the lands that we have up in Sun River, and we also have the funds set forward in the Plainfield Reserve that need to be used on those lands in particular. As Sea Park, as you can see in the materials, have been looking to establish a multi-use sport court for a number of years, and at one point put forward a grant application that was not successful. However, the demand and the need and the like for this is still continuing, so it seems that this would be a potential good location for this and for those particular lands. So you can see the various pieces here, and then there is a request that came forward that council looked to provide Sea Park with agreement in principle to design and build the sport court on the land owned by the district and access the $400,000 set aside in the reserve fund for the project. Councillor Casper.
I think this is a good use for the money because we're restricted by the fact that the covenant, its money is to be used to develop some type of sports activities or a field activity and I hope that this would meet that requirement or fit in.
Because I've talked a bit with staff because there has been some conversations from residents have asked if it could be used to create a park, but it is specific that it has to be a plain surface, so we can't just take it and turn it into a grassed park. It has to be for a playing field. That's how the bylaw is defined. So that's where it seems that through this process there would be a way to do this, and also then there would be still, the size of the land is quite significant.
And if I just may add to that, because the covenant that is registered on title regarding this property does reference development of fields.
Yep.
And I'm talking play field, like sports or whatever type of activities. So that's why our bylaw is restricted to that. And that was the problem, I think, is that the covenant never got modified or changed.
No, and then also we had looked at moving those funds over to the turf field when it was determined that the fields would not fit on those lands, because that was one of the issues, and we couldn't do that. They have to be specifically here. So I think it's just a way to get this asset going that's needed in our community. Councillor Parkinson?
Through your worship. So the funding, I was under the understanding that the funding had to be used in Sun River for a sports place there, right?
Yeah.
So will then, it's not Sea Park that will own it? Will it be the District of Sooke that owns it?
Yeah. Councillor?
Is
it? Thank you, Your Worship. I read the June 25th letter from Sea Park. It's saying that they would like council to provide Sea Park with an agreement in principle to design and build the court. So it sounds like to me they're asking council to appoint them as the design builder of this project on our lands. So I don't know if it's clear as to who's, I mean, it's district property. So we're going to run into a situation we did with the turf field funding, that it's not a capital project of the district if you're granting money to someone else.
So we would own it, though.
Your Worship, it's not clear in here. It's saying...
Well, what I'm telling you is that from being at that commission meeting, the idea would be that the district would retain the asset. And I just based with the library. We own the land.
So if I
They're
could add...
designing and building on it.
If I could add, the budget that I saw in the original request was in 2012, almost $700,000. So I imagine now it's a lot higher than that. So the $400,000 wouldn't be anywhere near what we would have to then put on our books.
But what I'm saying, though, is that should council move forward with this, what they put forward at that time was like the Cadillac version. Sea Park also, as you see in their strategic plan, has this identified as something they would potentially also have access to capital funds as well. The challenge is that Sea Park lands, as you see, like the topography does not lend itself well. Like, it's just, where would this physically be located? It could not be located on their land, so they would have to look at acquiring other land to build this because their own land doesn't have the space for it. So that way, I think, should council look to do this, then we can get further feedback back from the commission as to, okay, who's doing what. But nothing will move if council isn't open to the idea. So that's where it's just agreement in principle at this stage. And then I think we can get further feedback. Okay, look, we only have this much, and your grant application, let's say it's at $900,000 more. Would Sea Park then commit other funds to it?
Sorry, I'd just like to add, if it's our district project on our district land, then we would treat the full $700,000 as the asset. We would be recording grant revenue from the CRD for the remaining cost. But we would also potentially have to, procure this because of the cost of this thing. It's going to have to be procured, as far as I can tell, through BC bid. It's a large capital project that I'm not sure if we could just give it to the CRD to manage. If that's what they're asking for, it seems to be they want council to appoint them as the project manager, build this thing.
Well, that's one thing, because we're not in the recreation business. Well, they are, right? So in terms of filling a community need, in some cases we can't do everything. So who do you look at? We need a golf course in Sooke, right? Do we have staff and greenskeeping, all that sort of thing? Well, Sea Park does. They're in the recreational business, so that's where they run those facilities on behalf of the community. So in some ways, it's the case of, yes, they did buy the golf course land and they own and operate it now, but also there's school programs that run out of Journey Middle School, for example, where they have agreement. The skate park is on school district land, not on not on CRD, C Park land, but they operate, maintain, and run the skate park, the school programs that run out of the schools and the like. So that's where I think there's some logistics, like we can sort all this out if council is willing to do that. But if council says, no, we don't want to do it, then this conversation's over. So yeah, I think like in this case, a staff report back, just how would this process unfold, look like, and then it's the case you can talk to Mr. Kanoki at C Park and say, okay, now how does this look, and take it forward. But if council doesn't want to do it, then it's over. See what I mean?
Yeah, Your Worship, I would just say, given it is our land and that it's our project, and then we would have to tender it appropriately.
Right, okay. Councillor Casper, then Ray, then Loggins? Okay. Councillor Ray, then Casper, then?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I guess for me, I don't want to see this take on the same dynamics that the library did. And so I'm just wondering in terms of sort of just stepping back. I think it's a great idea. I like the idea that those lands could, up in Sun River, could be used. And I just put this out to staff. If we talked about that council support in principle, so that we can then get a report back before we start agreeing to an agreement in principle and putting $400,000 up like that. I just think we need to take another step to look at this, because I hear what our CAO is saying, and I'm just mindful that I would like to make sure that we can proceed in a more informed way, because I just feel this is a little bit more out of my league with not enough information.
Yeah, no. Absolutely fair enough. So, council support in principle. Did you want to do a motion?
Well, I think, the council support in principle, the development in partnership with C Park.
To design and build a multi-use, yeah.
And I would expect that would also include, like, if it is the District of Sooke, the costs that come after, who does the maintenance, all that sort of thing. Like I like a comprehensive work
yeah.
to sort of define responsibilities.
Okay. No, that sounds good. Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I just think that, this is the first step, and what could be a joint venture or partnership in making this a reality. And I think that we have to think outside the box, and because as you've mentioned earlier, Your Worship, that C Park has built up some capital reserves. They have a plan that has identified this as a potential project, and as you said, the lands that they currently have are very restrictive on having this type of use present. It's my understanding, just in my attendance at the last C Park meeting where this was loosely discussed, was that C Park would deal with all the programming of the use of this, and would deal with all the other aspects of it. And our benefit is that this is a way to utilize the dollars that have been set aside because of that restricted covenant on the title of the property that seems to not want to go away, and so we've got to deal with this. I just think that if this gets passed, then the next step is to have a more detailed discussion, and then we can come forward with some ideas, because they may have better opportunities for that other balance of money as opposed to us, because they are accumulating capital reserves.
That's
on
right,
an
and
ongoing basis.
It's a priority in their strategic plan. You know, this year they're focused on the gym expansion, but it's an ongoing one, and it's just been shifting and moving about. But it had come up in previous years. So, to our CAO, yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to add the bylaw, of course, as mentioned already, the money to be used for capital works related to playing fields. So it does, unless we amend the bylaw, it does need to be used for capital works, yes, as in us building something on that property. Not like the turf field, that's not a capital project, that ended up being a grant, right? So if CPark wants to give us some, if we want to put this project in the financial plan and CPark wants to contribute to it, that's a different story. But then the issue too we would need to look at is, we're not running any fields at this point, and we may have liability concerns that we haven't even thought about here. Like, they're used to running recreation complexes and all that stuff. So if we had the partnership agreement and worked all that out as to their operating, they're taking all the risk from operating. It's just our land, our asset, that kind of thing. But that's a lot of information to work out, and we'd like to get a staff report in front of you.
Absolutely. We would need that just so we can sort it out in detail. It was just the case of how do we get something rolling, and would council support something like this? So I imagine it would be, we want to ensure that we understand where we're going with this. Councillor Loggins, and then I'll go back to Councillor.
Thank you. I don't support giving this to CPark, but as Mr. Blackhall mentioned, if they would support us in creating this project, I think that's the best way to go. And also, I would even tender it, to be honest. But my concern is that we're a bit short-sighted with how this is looking, even though this is a more long-term project, because municipalities are in the business of parks and recreation. However, we are just not there yet. So giving that control to CPark to run all the programming is good on a contract basis once it's completed, but we need to be able to retain control of that if we want to take that back and bring it into our parks and recreation system in the future. And so that's something that I'd be really cautious of going into a partnership like this, and giving away our control for the future of that asset. And I think that was it. I have my notes all mixed up. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we'll get a report back, and we can see how that will all work out.
Sorry, the one thing that I did want to mention as well is that this is the type of project that we need to have the foresight to make money off of as well, to put back into other parks reserves and what have you. So for us to retain that control over the programming, or have a bit of like money come back from the programming or something, where you're either leasing it or contracting it or however it works, that would be a bonus as well.
Okay. Maybe we could argue that we would put in a playground without any, you build a playground and put in equipment, but you don't get any return other than kids' enjoyment, which I think is priceless.
And that is 100% true. However, when we're building lacrosse fields or something where there's a potential for tournaments and large sport tourism dollars coming to the community, that's a different story. If you're looking at renting the facility to different groups, that's a different story.
Yeah, and that's where we'll see. We need the staff report. This is just the first step, just to see, and it's here because it's been a need in the community. It comes up ongoing. How can we get there? How can we work together? How can we make something happen? So it's just the first step.
I agree. I just think that this first step is the wrong direction. So I'll be voting against the motion.
Okay. Councillor Ray?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And staff have added the second part, which I did not speak to. So I just like to make sure that that that's included in the motion, so.
That would be a separate motion, because
Okay.
we haven't moved or seconded. It's just there because I think it's a piece that we need to do.
Yeah. And then just to follow up to Councillor Logan's comments, I'm quite reluctant to look at bringing more in-house, and I think the nature of Sea Park, and I stand corrected because I don't fully know the history on this, but the composition of the Sea Park Board is the District of Sooke and Wanda Fuca, and it's from the CRD days before we incorporated. So I think this is the right way to go. I don't think we want to start taking on something that already exists in our community and I think functions quite well because we do have control as voting members on the board. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the commission itself is made up of the mayor and a councillor, or mayor as CRD director. So Councillor Casper attends as alternate, and then there's a councillor, which is Councillor Berger, and I believe yourself is alternate, 2 Sooke representatives, and then there's Wanda Fuca, Mike Hicks, and 1 public member. So yes, Sooke does have the voting power in this case, and then there's a youth appointment, which is non-voting on financial matters. It's just the position is vacant. It's a hard one to fill.
Just to clarify, I don't mean control of it in terms of voting at the table. I mean receiving the money that they'll be making off of it.
I was clarifying Councillor Ray's question.
As me as well. I'm not talking, because I know that was in terms of what I was saying, and control, I'm talking about in terms of the financial benefit that Sea Park would be receiving that we would not be.
But in partnership, we would work that out together. That's what this is about. Councillor Parkinson.
Through your worship. So in regards to the CRD and Sea Park, the reason why we're still part of it is because it was the entire area from Port Renfrew to East Sooke that purchased the swimming pool, that purchased the arena. So that's why that's a shared benefit. But everything that's new is not a shared benefit when it comes to lands which is within our jurisdiction, right? So we keep giving away small pieces to the CRD, as Councillor Logan said, where we could have been making money back on the golf course if we kept it in our jurisdiction and not there. So I agree with you.
The golf course is just breaking even. We have one. I think we sometimes need to celebrate that we have a golf course versus no golf course. It was Sea Park that took the initiative. I didn't see council doing it. Anyway. So I'll call the question on the first part then, the motion that we moved. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Loggins is opposed. And the second part is that council directs staff to provide a report on the use of funds contained in the bylaw number 608 Plainfields Reserve Fund 2014 for the project. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Question, Councillor Pearson?
Yes, I haven't been weighing in. I just think that this is a tangled web that we're getting into. So, I think this is initial good steps, and I thank staff for taking this on. But it's going to be complicated by the time we get to the bottom of this one. Thank you.
Could be, but we'll see and then if it becomes too complicated, this is just a first step. If you don't like it, you don't continue on. Anyway, that's been moved and seconded. So all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. I didn't see any opposition to that. Okay, so moving on, follow-up to correspondence to council letters. We have a few here. ICBC Seniors Driving Test. We have the Harbour Authority of BC Merge and Board Liaison. They did state that they have an AGM for the Harbour Authority coming up, so they'll be raising the matter at that time. And they are unable to accommodate Dr. Nay's request. So these are just here for your information. Move receipt by Councillor Loggins, seconded by Councillor Casper. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We have a letter here from the correspondence from the town of Sydney. They're withdrawing from the CRD Arts bylaw. So a motion to receive. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor? Okay. Councillor
Through your worship, I was wondering why the district of Sooke is listed on here when we're not a member yet.
Don't
Just
know.
out of curiosity. Okay.
Courtesy, maybe because we're entering into it, so they include. I have no idea. Councillor Ray?
Yeah, I was just wondering if anybody knew why they were withdrawing.
Nope.
We just got the letters saying that they were, and nobody knows why.
All I have is the letter.
Thank you.
All those in favor of receipt? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. And several items of correspondence from June the 18th to the June 30th. And there's probably a few that you would like to remove. There's a request here from the Knox Vision Society. This might be what Councillor Casper spoke to, so we'll withdraw that one. There's a request from Simon Investments regarding property tax relief for the Grant Manor home. That maybe you want to do that one.
Yeah.
There's also a proclamation request that I'll proclaim that. I don't require a resolution for that. So, but it's just here for your interest that we'll make that proclamation for September. Any other pieces? There's some really nice thank you cards. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll receive, and there's also some comments on the leash from the canine group. So we've sort of dealt with that. So maybe we'll withdraw those 3 items, and we can I may have a motion to receive the rest for information. We've received by Councillor Loggins, seconded by Councillor Parkinson.
Okay.
All those in favor? Opposed, carried. So we'll start with the Knox Vision Society letter. Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I just, could this be referred to staff and we can get a report on it? Because it's requesting the DCC matter, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
And I know there's a special process we have to go by.
To Mr. Blackhall, please.
Thanks, Your Worship. To Councillor Casper's comments, Council's already approved the waiving of the DCCs for the affordable housing component, and that the non-affordable housing component be granted back. We just didn't want to do that without first actual request from them. Okay. And so this will act as that request, and we'll follow through now.
Okay. And the other item that I mentioned was in regard to the taxes. Did they actually have to pay taxes, even though we did grant an exemption on their housing project?
Yeah, and through Your Worship again, they've got a statutory exemption on the church property. They didn't have an exemption on the other property, and they would have to apply for a permissive tax exemption, and we didn't get an application from them at the time because I don't even know if the lot had actually been. It didn't show up in our system until January of this year.
So it didn't show up then, but there were 3 lots. They all had an exemption. We amended the bylaw, I think in 2015 or 16, because one of the lots had sold to a private person, and that was where the house was. And then there were still the 2 lots remaining, which was the church and the current site of where the housing project is being built. So that means that they didn't get notified because the 2 lots were already exempt. And so does that mean that they only applied for the church and didn't apply for the housing? Because if we didn't hear from them, how did they get the church exemption if they didn't ask for it? And I just assumed that they would have been asking for both of those lots.
Through Your Worship, we didn't get an application from them because it's a statutorily exempt property. so it hasn't needed to be in our bylaw. It could be added, but it didn't need to be because it's already exempted by the province. So that exemption is really meant for the church itself and the land, immediately occupying underneath the church. It doesn't apply to the land, the rest of the land. They have to apply for a permissive exemption for that. That piece of property, however, has been like that by the province, so we haven't brought it up. It's been like that. But the other piece, where the housing project is now, I believe used to have a house on it, a rental house?
No, it's
vacant house. So that one did pay tax. And so now the housing project itself, people have asked that council at some point consider a permissive exemption, which is fine. There's nothing there to tax yet other than the bare land itself. The improvements aren't valued yet. And they'll have to come forward with an application request, but we haven't received one yet. If it's something council would like staff to initiate, we can come back with a staff report.
Okay, after hearing that, then I would move that staff prepare a staff report on how this process can be initiated and to get the ball rolling, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Second.
Okay, so that's moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Okay, we got that motion. And then what about their request? The initial part was the request for the refunding of those fees.
Your
This
Worship,
one is the motion is just to do with the permissive tax exemption.
Yeah, Your Worship, we don't need a motion for that because council's already approved that the fees be
I see.
granted
Okay,
back.
so that's done. So maybe in response then we can just send something back. Okay, anything further? All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried unanimously. I'll just share with you that I've received a few inquiries from some people who are somehow of the belief that I insisted that those that are resting in the cemetery be dug out and put away to make room for housing. And a number of angry people had telephoned me on that matter. I assured them that that wasn't the case, and there's actually a fence around the cemetery and that there's archaeological and so forth, and I do not have any sort of I just don't have that sort of power at all. So I sent those that were concerned photos of the project that it was, and then the pastor there had told me that also, I guess for work safe or whatever, they had to fence it to protect that site. So if there's fencing around the cemetery, if you were to visit somebody and would see that, that would be potentially why. I don't know. I don't know how this started or whatever, but it was interesting and distressing, actually, to say the least. Okay. All in a day's work. It's all good. Okay, next we have a letter from Seamont Investments requesting property tax relief. That's item H.
That's for when it was being developed, right?
And that was there's a request for 6921 to seek relief there. No, we've done both of these. Yep. We've done that because we already received the block and then we received the first one already, so that's been carried and it's moved.
And
so
I
we're on to the
second it
next
for
one.
you.
Yep. Yeah, we just did.
Oh, no, I'm talking about the next one.
Okay, then I'm on to Grant Road, and they were asking here that they get relief at this time here due to the set of events that took place.
That's what.
It's a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I thought we dealt with that one.
I don't know. Because they're looking for the period from July the 4th, 2015, and August of 2016, which time, yeah. Mr. Blackhall?
Thank you, Your Worship. We wouldn't be able to provide, or council, wouldn't be able to provide a permissive exemption for tax for these guys, or if council wanted to give them a grant, I guess, for some purpose. However, it's a private company from what I can tell just from their name. I don't know if
Yeah.
it's a nonprofit or charitable in nature, so it wouldn't meet property tax relief program.
Okay, so then I think we just need to write back and just outline those reasons. Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Blackwell, would their assessed value not be, because it was destroyed at that time, would their assessed value not take care of that? That's why when I read this, I was under the impression, not from a revenue point of view, but from an overall assessed point of view.
Yep.
Wouldn't it go to zero at the point when the building was being...
Through your worship, the taxing, I would think, for an apartment building would be on a business base, like they did with the golf course property. So if BC Assessment was aware that it had been burned down and wasn't available for use, then the owner could have applied to the assessment authority for relief on the assessment, and then also would have insurance in place for business interruption. So it isn't really a matter staff would feel to bring forward to council.
Okay. So are we okay just to respond back and just say that further to your letter dated this, council is unable to grant a permissive, any sort of property tax relief due to these reasons that Mr. Blackhall's citing, and we can send that back so they understand why. I think that's important. Moved by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Loggins. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. The last one I wanted just to raise was that I'll do a proclamation for the Ride for Refuge Day, which is coming up on September 9th. So I just need you to please receive that for information, because we extracted that. So moved by Councillor Parkinson and seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. So that completes the correspondence, and that brings us to council verbal reports. Okay, so move on to notice of motion.
Oh, you got no reports?
I'm not prepared. It's for a report.
I'll speak to it.
Councillor Parkinson?
So,
are you moving your notice of motion, or are you doing
no,
a
I'm
verbal
doing
report?
the verbal report right now.
Okay.
I just wanted to inform council that Communities in Bloom is taking place on July 16th to the 18th, which is next Monday to Wednesday. And that on the Monday evening, there is a business appreciation where they give out the certificates at Little Vienna, and that is at 6 o'clock, and that you're all invited to come. Judges are here on Tuesday, Wednesday.
Okay. I'll just remind council that we have 2 council meetings coming up in 2 weeks' time. There's one on the Monday, and then all the public hearings on Tuesday. Okay, so that's a special council meeting that's been formed. I'm off to UBCM executive meetings. Councillor Casper will attend the board meeting on my behalf day after tomorrow. Okay, so then our notice of motion, and this has been brought forward by Councillor Parkinson, that the District of Sooke Bylaw 296 unsightly premises be amended to include fines for garbage and recycling put out on the curb prior to 6 a.m. on garbage and recycling pickup days. We have a seconder for this notice of motion. Seconded by Councillor Loggins. And speaking to it, Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you. So the notice of motion should have stated 5 a.m. for one thing. But I just wanted to bring forward that Transition Sooke brought forward in 2016 a proposal for council to adopt a bylaw for attractants and garbage out. And that council approved it unanimously. That's sitting here. And since 2016, we have done nothing about it, and we have not received a report in this regards. There is a great problem, and it's a lot of concern is with bears, because there's a number of bears that are out in the area at this time. And within the last 2 weeks, I've just seen 3 bears in different areas of Sooke. But it's also for people putting out their garbage that are in plastic bags and not put into containers. So there's also other animals that are getting into it, such as raccoons and the crows and strewing across the roadways. So I think that we have a real problem with this, and I think that as residents of Sooke, we should all be responsible for what we do. So the bylaw wasn't meant to go out and give someone a fine because they put their garbage bag out. It was more along the lines of informing them that if there's a constant problem with it and it's becoming an area where there is a huge problem on Grant Road, there's an area where the bears come continuously because people continuously put out their garbage and have no regard. So we need to do something to control that, I believe. So I would like to move, well, I can't do that. So, I think that we as a district have to step up and be responsible and put something in place because we do not have garbage pickup in Sooke as well, or big garbage days. We do nothing to help the people with the garbage. So I think that it's time that we stepped up to the plate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parkinson. Any comments on the motion? Councillor Ray, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I did put out on my Councillor Carrie Ray page a post acknowledging that we do need to do something in our community about garbage and bears. It reached over 7,000 people and probably had well over 100 comments on various different sites. I agree with Councillor Parkinson that we do need to work to help curb the issues around garbage, but I cannot support the motion as it is. The issue for me, and was loud and clear by many people who responded, people who work shift work and get home at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're not getting up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock to put their garbage out. Also, people who leave before the 5 a.m., they're gone at 4:30 or 4 o'clock, they're going to put their garbage out. It's always easy to say, well, get somebody else to do it for you, but there's lots of people who are not in that position. And then the other thing that was duly noted, as it was made, comments were made a number of times, is we don't enforce the bylaws that we already have, and who will be out there at 5 o'clock in the morning enforcing it. I believe that we do need to do more, but I don't think this is the avenue to do it. I think it's going to cause a lot of grief for a lot of people who work outside of our community, and I would like to see, as a follow-up to what Councillor Parkinson was saying, if we want to put some money out there, let's put it into education. Let's the Bearwise programs. Ms. Reed is doing an awesome job. Let's work a little bit more from an educational perspective and target those that are being difficult. But I cannot support this bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Parkinson.
Through Your Worship, in regards to putting the garbage out, I know that education is a great thing. I sit on the Bearwise Committee, so I know what we are doing to try to inform people. Obviously, a lot more needs to be done. I think that by saying put it out at 5 o'clock, if you put it out the night before, that would be fine if you had it in a garbage can that was completely closed in. There are bear-proof garbage cans, and they do sell them at Home Hardware. So there are things that people can do, and then that way you could put them out the night before if you had to because you were working. But at the rate we're going, we will not take any responsibility for this, and there are too many bears that have to be put down, or wildlife. And a number of wildlife gets hurt because of the garbage on the side of the road, because people traveling too quickly. And I just think more has to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Loggins.
I see both sides of this, but one thing that I do really appreciate is that it's included in the unsightly premises bylaw, because I think that's the key here, is that it's not anyone putting their garbage out at 5 a.m. It's people putting their garbage out early, and then it's strewn all over the entire road, and that's the piece that we don't need happening, whether it's bears or raccoons or birds or anything, because some people even leave it out in garbage bags and then the crows pick at it and spread it everywhere. So the unsightly premises piece to me is a key piece. I really like that, and I think that would, if we did get to a place where we could start fining everyone for all of the bylaw infractions, which won't happen anyway. But then it would be those key people who are leaving them out repetitively and having their garbage strewn repetitively that would be penalized, and not anyone who's just leaving and trying to make the process work. So perhaps the time is the issue, and that just needs to be adjusted. I don't know. But I feel like the time, no matter what it is, won't work for everyone. So I'm not sure what we can fix about that.
Just I'm picking up on what Councillor Logan said, and then I'll go to Councillor Casper. It's a good point in terms of the unsightly premises, because I think that and many people do put their garbage out the night before without any incident whatsoever. So it's not a problem. It's a problem where it falls in the unsightly area and there's garbage and it's accumulating and it's an attractant, and it's a known attractant, and Wildwise has been there many times and it's still an incident. And it isn't just the bears, because my folks found an owl that had an injured wing in their yard, and likely it was drawn to a smaller critter that was feeding on garbage, and then the owl swooped down after the smaller critter, and then it got hit by the vehicle, and it couldn't be saved, which was kind of sad. But that's where it's because of garbage strewn in the area, and it's drawing not just bears, it's other types of creatures to the area, and it's ongoing. Neighbors changed, the problem solved. Councillor Casper.
Well, you know, the intent of the motion, it's well-meaning, but the problem is that you know, the wildlife, the bears or the raccoons or whatever, they don't care what time it is. It's when the garbage goes out, and they'll go out when the garbage goes out, and you could say 7 o'clock, you could say any time. Those animals will still go there, whether it's nighttime or day, and that's the issue, is how secure are the containers and the garbage that's left outside. I think what's missing in any discussion is feedback from the waste haulers, because they're the people who actually are coming around and picking this stuff up. I know in my neighborhood there's a waste hauler comes by at around 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning, and then others come by at different times. Now, depending on what neighborhood you live in, and I know it's difficult because when people travel to work, we see them on the road at 6 o'clock in the morning, and Highway 14 is stacked with vehicles. It's obvious those people left home before 6 o'clock. And so, you know, the timing of this, yes, it's well-meaning, but I think there's a broader discussion that has to take place. Because I wouldn't want to see us establish certain conditions and rules relating to garbage and containers without having a broader discussion. And, you know, who knows, there might be some great ideas out there, and I'm sure there will be.
Okay. Councillor Ray, then Parkinson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I think one of the things that's been alluded to is that people who don't even put the garbage in a container and just leave it out in bags, and so that it smells a great deal more. So I think there's a discussion here, but I think we need to look at other options, like Councillor Casper said as well.
Okay, Councillor Parkinson.
Through Your Worship. Back in November of 2016, the council made the motion, and it was approved unanimously that staff provide a report. It was to protective services, which we used to have, which we no longer do, but for a recommendation for council. So I would like to see us put something together so that we have something in place should we ever be able to do something. So have staff formulate a plan and put it out so we can follow guidelines for garbage and where do I want to go with this? For input, geez. Yeah. Like we were all on the same page at one time, that we all thought we had to do something. Now we think we have to do nothing. Right? We gotta come forward. We gotta put something in place. We gotta. We can call the question on this. I'd like to make another motion.
Okay, so I will call the question on this. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Casper, Ray, and Pearson are opposed. So it fails.
That's okay.
Tie vote. So, another motion then.
I would like, through your worship, I'd like to move that council direct staff to prepare a staff report on waste management bylaw requiring residents on the requirements for putting food scrap totes out, meaning you should wash your recycling before you put it out so that it's not a detractant. This is just a sidebar. And on garbage.
Okay, so that council directs staff to prepare a report on the requirements
For waste management bylaw.
for waste management bylaw?
That's what we had called it when we did our previous motion. It was waste management.
Okay,
so for garbage, basically.
So that was the motion that we approved back in the day?
2016.
Okay, so it's the same. Okay, is there a seconder for that? I'll second it. Seconded by Councillor Casper. Okay. Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Okay. Well done, Councillor Parkinson. Got there.
Sometimes it's a bit hard.
So, okay, so that's great. We'll look forward to that.
Enough of my information.
Item 17, report of released in-camera resolutions. So we do have a Rise-In report, and that is that this is in regards to the Affordable Housing Committee that will be meeting on July the 26th at 1 p.m., chaired by Councillor Loggins. And the Rise-In report is that the following individuals be appointed to the committee. That'll be Andrew Moore, Britt Sentowski, Donnie Eve, Ellen Lures, Lorna Clark, Loretta Deutscher, Nikki Loggins, Sherry Thompson, and Sari Ringma. Oh, look, and there it is. And that's the Rise-In report. So we're rising and reporting. Councillor Loggins?
It's okay. No, it's all good.
You're all good? Yeah. Good. Okay. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Pearson. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion